Chapter 1. There was one thing Naruto Uzumaki had always wanted: a family. Not a team or a mission or someone calling him a hero. No. He longed for a mom who'd swipe imaginary dirt from his face with a thumb and spit. A dad who'd ruffle his hair and say, "Good job, son." Maybe even an older brother who'd let him tag along, or a little sibling to look out for. But that was all wishful thinking. What Naruto had instead were the village shinobi. They were masked visitors who checked in once a week at his tiny apartment. They came to inspect, to judge, to report. They'd peer into cupboards and tell him he had dusty floors. They made sure he was eating and still breathing. Most times he only knew they'd been there because there was an extra cup of ramen on the table, or a new pair of socks folded on his bed. Sometimes a note scolded him about chores. If Naruto happened to catch one in the act, the ninja would say nothing. Just stare. Like being near him was a punishment. If he tried to talk, they vanished even faster. What he hadn't realized back then was that they weren't just dropping by. They were watching. All the time. He figured it out after growing tired of the whispers, the stares, the cold shoulders. Crying about it had done nothing. Yelling even less. The villagers still looked through him. Talked around him when they thought he wasn't listening. Glared like he'd stolen something from them. He tried running away more than once, but the ninja always dragged him back. Not that he had anywhere to go. The only kids who let him hang around were older boys, who let him tag along once or twice a month. Not really friends. They were more like reluctant big brothers. But Naruto learned more from them than anywhere else. The group had 4 boys. Mindo was their ringleader, a sharp-eyed brunette with more swagger than caution. He liked Naruto, but wouldn't let him join officially. It was too much attention, too many grown-ups asking questions. Still, Mindo passed on the important stuff. "Don't take crap from anyone," he'd say. "They've got nothing to do with you. Make sure they know it." Naruto clung to every word. But what worked for Mindo didn't always work for him. Things changed after Naruto got shoved around by a shopkeeper for trying to buy candy, with his own money, no less. When Mindo saw the bruises, he stopped giving advice and started giving lessons. Twice a week, Mindo would sneak out to teach Naruto the basics of street fighting. Kutomi, another of the crew, sometimes helped. He was lean and quick, with a shinobi for a father. Kutomi didn't want to follow in his dad's footsteps, but the training stuck. With Mindo's scrappy instincts and Kutomi's taijutsu tips, Naruto learned the art of unpredictability. When the other two, Taiko and Shinzo, found out about the side sessions, they insisted on contributing too. Taiko, tall and wiry, came from the same orphanage as Naruto. A pickpocket with a locket collection and a philosophy: "Skills should be passed down. You're my legacy now." Shinzo, wild-haired and forever grinning, was the prankster. "Us blondes have to stick together," he declared before schooling Naruto in booby traps and sleight of hand. By 7, Naruto could break into a house, plant a stink bomb, and vanish without a trace. But all the fun came with consequences. The older boys got in more trouble than usual. Naruto made a decision. He'd go solo until things cooled off. The group still welcomed him, but he kept his distance and focused his efforts on a new mission: make the villagers eat their words, one prank at a time. His first solo strike didn't go as planned. Naruto balanced on stacked crates, aiming to rig a bucket of river mud above a doorway. Classic setup. But just as he reached to steady the trap, it was gone. Poof. A few feet away stood a ninja holding the bucket. Same navy uniform, same pocketed vest, same unreadable mask. "You can't do that," the ninja said flatly. Naruto blinked, thrown off for only a second. "Says who? I pulled this on Takena last month. I scared him so bad he dropped his cabbage. What? He hire a bodyguard now." No reply. Just a disappearing ninja and a very frustrated 7-year-old. The next day, Naruto tried again. Different prank. Different time. Different ninja shutting him down. He got clever. He was earlier hours, or tried new locations. And still, he was intercepted every time. Even skipping class didn't help. It was undeniable now. He was being followed. He started looking for them. There were flashes of green and blue behind corners, the swish of a vest disappearing over a rooftop. His gut said they were always there. Fine. If they wanted to tail Naruto Uzumaki, he'd give them a run for their money. The first time he ditched them, it was a quick turn through a busy market. He draped a ratty blanket over his blonde hair and slipped into the crowd. He saw one of the ninjas scanning rooftops from above, looking the wrong way. Naruto slipped back the way he came and splat. Finally got Sumisu with that bucket of mud. Didn't work a second time, or the time after that. So it became a game. How many times could he outsmart them? How many pranks could he pull before they caught on? School was boring. But this was purpose. The ninjas got better at hiding. In just a week, Naruto couldn't spot them at all. Still, he could feel their eyes on him. Whenever that strange sensation crept in and he attempted a prank, someone appeared to stop it. If he felt nothing, he got away clean. It didn't take long to figure out the pattern. Eventually, he discovered why they had become so hard to find. They weren't wearing uniforms anymore. They didn't even have forehead protectors. It was strange, though. He couldn't seem to remember their faces. They definitely weren't wearing masks, yet each one vanished from his memory like smoke. So Naruto started studying the villagers more carefully. Some people seemed oddly aware, even while pretending to read the newspaper or browsing vegetables. Others moved too smoothly, almost like they were gliding. He tested his suspicions a few times. Sure enough, the people who stopped him matched the ones he had picked out earlier. That made things exciting. Each time he thought he had it figured out, the ninja watchers changed their routine. He began watching the trainees at the academy instead of pulling pranks. But the teachers didn't like him hanging around, so he learned to hide in bushes. Even then, if he got too close, they always seemed to notice. Maybe they could sense him watching them, the same way he could feel when he was being watched. Either way, he needed to observe the students so he could guess what moves the ninja watchers might make next. He figured that to beat a ninja, he would have to become one. Through a lot of trial and error, Naruto figured out how close he could get before the teachers noticed him. He learned how they jumped between rooftops. He saw how bouncing off walls at sharp angles made turns faster. With each new trick, he got better at dodging his watchers and staying hidden. But the ninjas weren't finished adapting. When they began following him in pairs, things got harder. No matter what he tried, he couldn't get away. Skipping school only made the teachers more irritated. After a full week of constant surveillance, Naruto decided watching from afar wasn't enough anymore. He had never tried sneaking away at night. That seemed like the perfect time to test a new idea. He waited until he was sure no one would check on him, then stuffed his bed with extra clothes to make it look like he was still sleeping. He slipped through the bathroom window, which was just big enough to fit through. In another year or two, he might not have been so lucky. Wearing dark clothes and using the stealth Taiko had taught him, Naruto reached the academy without any trouble. He found a window on the second floor, and once inside, he explored the building until he discovered the library. Taiko's old lockpick set was missing a few tools, which is why he gave it to Naruto, but it was still enough to open the door. Most of the scrolls were about boring topics like history, tactics, or dry military theory. Then he found a section on chakra, and that changed everything. Some scrolls mentioned how higher-level ninja could sense chakra, and even hide their own. They didn't explain how, only that it was something elite ninja could do. It was called a high chunin level skill. Naruto didn't know what that really meant, but he understood enough. If he wanted to ditch the ninja watchers, he'd need to learn how to do it. He read every scroll and book he could find on chakra in 3 days. It wasn't a large section. One book explained the 12 hand signs used to control chakra and shape it into jutsus. He memorized every one. During the hour he pretended to sleep at night, he practiced those signs under the covers, adding one at a time until he knew them all. The only jutsus listed were the basics: Bushin, Kawamari, and Hinge. Kawamari was a substitution technique. It let a ninja switch places with a nearby object to escape. It seemed useful, but the first time he tried it, the academy teachers would know he was using ninjutsu. Given how they already treated him, Naruto didn't want to find out how they'd react. Bushin created an illusion clone. It could fool someone, but the clone couldn't go far, and the scroll said distance depended on the user's strength and skill. Naruto wasn't confident he had enough of either. Hinge was different. With Hinge, he could transform into another person. All it took was holding a clear mental image. Naruto realized he didn't even need to copy someone real. He could invent someone brand new. Someone no one would ever suspect of being Naruto Uzumaki. He found a training spot in the woods and got to work. The book said chakra capacity increased through practice and physical conditioning, so he built a routine. Lots of push-ups, sit-ups, punching, kicking, and the simple kata that Kutomi had shown him. After that, he practiced Hinge deep into the night. During the day, he focused on learning how to hide his chakra. He already knew how to feel it. That part wasn't hard. He just had to close his eyes and focus. His chakra always felt a little different. Brighter somehow. The chakra from others seemed quieter, more muted. Naruto figured that was normal. After all, shouldn't a person feel their own chakra more strongly than someone else's? When he ran from the ninja watchers after school, he used every trick he had. If he got enough distance, he'd stop and hide, then try something new. Most of the time, they found him right away. He figured they could sense his chakra. If his trick worked, they would walk right past him. If not, they'd catch him like always. Once Naruto figured out that the feeling of being watched was actually him sensing chakra, he started focusing on it more carefully. Before long, he could sense his watchers a few blocks away instead of only when they were close by. But with this skill came an unexpected side effect. He started sensing everyone else too. At first, it was confusing. It felt like the entire village was crowded around him. Then he noticed the difference. The villagers' presence felt soft and hazy, like curling up near a sleepy cat in a patch of sun. But the ninja watchers were sharp and vivid, more like a cat hissing with its back arched. That distinction helped. After about a week, he found it useful. He could tell who was a disguised ninja and who was a regular person. Even empty houses felt different. He could walk by and sense whether anyone was inside without needing to look. Suppressing his own chakra, though, that was much harder. He tried everything he could think of. He'd gather his chakra and imagine himself vanishing. Sometimes he pictured it like mist, drifting away until there was nothing left to notice. Nothing worked. Every time he failed, he acted as if he thought he had gotten away. Sometimes he'd stroll the village for fun before trying again or pulling a prank. Every attempt ended the same way. He was caught. Weeks passed. He hadn't pulled off a single successful hinge, and his frustration began to wear him down. Sneaking into the academy library had been more than a month ago, and all he had gained was a better sense of who was around him. He could now sleep in class and still absorb the key parts of a lesson, but that didn't feel like enough. He was about to quit when something finally worked. By forcing all his chakra into a small ball in his stomach and squeezing it tighter and tighter, his watchers walked past without noticing him. It made his head ache and his stomach twist for hours afterward, but it was a breakthrough. After repeating it a few dozen times, the headaches faded. The stomachache, while still uncomfortable, was easier to ignore. It felt like something small and wild was bouncing around inside him, scratching and scrambling to get out. But it worked. That week, Naruto made up for lost time with a wave of new pranks. Encouraged by that success, he refocused on Hinge. At first, he thought it would be simple. The first step was forming a hand seal and pushing chakra around the outside of his body. That part only took about a week to get right. The rest was trickier. The scroll had said to mold that chakra into the image you had in your mind. But Naruto couldn't remember exactly how. Rather than go back to the academy, he decided to experiment on his own. After thinking about chakra suppression, he wondered if he had memorized the jutsu wrong. Instead of surrounding his skin, he began gathering chakra just underneath it. His earlier attempts had been like forcing on a costume. Now he tried pulling his body into the chakra, letting it reshape him from within instead of just layering on top. The first time it worked, he nearly collapsed from the pain. His entire body burned, but it was still better than failure. So he kept trying. A week later, something finally clicked. One moment, he was crouched in the woods, pushing and pulling his chakra into shape, and the next he blacked out. When he woke and looked at his reflection in a puddle, he froze. A tall, blonde woman stared back at him with big blue eyes and long pigtails. His shirt felt tight, and his sleeves were too short. He could barely breathe. But he had done it. He had really done it. Naruto had used Hinge. Every part of him wanted to jump and shout and run through the streets bragging to everyone. But then he remembered the watchers. This was supposed to be a secret. He grinned, imagining one of the ninja approaching him and politely asking, "Excuse me, Mississippi, have you seen a young boy about this tall, with spiky blonde hair?" That would be perfect. Still, passing out from every attempt wasn't a good plan. He needed more control. And he needed to figure out how to fix little details, like the whisker marks on his cheeks. He had pictured his face without them, but they had stayed. Worse, the hinge hurt. His entire body felt like it had run 10 races and then fallen down a hill. His skin prickled like it was full of tiny needles. He tried to return to normal and realized with a jolt that he couldn't. His chakra didn't feel shaped anymore. This wasn't an illusion. It felt real. He tried to do the jutsu again, planning to transform back, but it didn't work the same way. Instead of pushing his chakra out, he had to pull it back in, drawing himself inward. It didn't work. Each time he tried, the hinge remained, He sensed ninja pass by more than once. Even if they weren't looking for him, it only added to his rising panic. He was supposed to be in class. Even when he skipped school, he always showed up in the morning. It let everyone know he was still around. The longer he stayed hidden, the more likely it was someone would go check on him. If they went into his apartment and found his bed stuffed with clothes, it'd be over. He'd probably have to stop practicing at night for a long while. As evening came, his fear didn't fade. In fact, it got worse. He sat curled up in the dirt, too afraid to move. A quiet part of him began to wonder if he'd be stuck like this forever. He thought about shouting for help. Maybe a ninja would hear him. Maybe one would help. But every time they had talked to him in the past, it was to stop him from doing something or to tell him to leave. So he said nothing. That night, Naruto fell asleep afraid he might always be a girl. When he woke up, his body felt a little stronger. His muscles ached less. His skin didn't burn quite as badly. With a deep sigh, he tried again. This time, he got close. He kept trying to reverse the process, pulling his chakra inward the same way he had pushed it outward the first time. But each attempt only resulted in suppression. He was almost there. Almost. Naruto's breakthrough came when he was tired. Too tired to fight it anymore. He gathered his chakra quietly beneath his skin and sat with it. He didn't try to shape it or suppress it. He just watched. Something shifted. The chakra began to move without his prompting. Not wild or chaotic. It was more like a slow swirl, tugging at his skin, pooling in his stomach, then gently flowing outward again. It reminded him of water sloshing in a bowl, settling with each breath. It was strange, familiar and unfamiliar all at once. It didn't feel like control. It felt like cooperation. Then came the pain. His muscles burned. His stomach turned. But he clenched his teeth, shut his eyes, and didn't resist. The chakra was doing something. He didn't want to get in its way. When it settled, he opened his eyes. The world had gotten bigger. Or rather, he had gotten smaller. He leaned over the stream beside him and stared at his reflection. A little kid with spiky blonde hair and bright blue eyes blinked back. He was himself again. If he had any energy left, he would have jumped for joy. Instead, his body felt as heavy and his legs barely worked. All he wanted was his bed. Forget the ninjas. He just needed to sleep. He stumbled toward his apartment, barely able to lift his feet. Near the edge of the forest, he bumped into something and toppled backward. When he looked up, there was a man standing above him dressed in black with a green vest. Naruto stared up at him, blinking slowly, and tried to remember what that meant. A ninja. That was important. But why? His thoughts faded as exhaustion pulled him under. Naruto woke in a white room that smelled faintly sharp and clean. Something was stuck in his arm, a needle, and he yanked it out, flinching at the tiny trickle of blood that followed. He pressed his hand to the spot and sat up. His knees wobbled. He reached out to steady himself. After a moment, his legs held still long enough to test a few steps. That was when he noticed the breeze. He was wearing a strange kind of dress that tied in the back and left part of him exposed. It was uncomfortable and weird. He looked around the room for his real clothes. There were 3 doors. One had a window that looked into a hallway. Another was cracked open, revealing a bathroom. The last one looked like a closet. Inside were his clothes, folded on a shelf. They were still dirty and had holes in them, but he didn't care. He pulled off the hospital gown and got dressed, feeling better the moment he had real clothes on. After using the bathroom, Naruto returned to the room and froze. An old man was sitting beside the bed, dressed in red and white robes with a wide hat that bore the symbol for fire. His face was lined and kind, with strange markings beneath each eye. Naruto stared. He didn't need long to recognize him. The Hokage. Panic rose in his chest. If the Hokage was here, it meant trouble. They must have found out he was learning ninjutsu. He wasn't supposed to be training. No one wanted him to be a ninja. He was Naruto Uzumaki, the kid nobody wanted around. He took a shaky breath, preparing to explain, when the old man smiled and spoke. "I see you're awakened up. You gave us quite a scare." Naruto stood stiffly, uncertain what to say. "Come, sit down. You're not in trouble, if that's what you're thinking. I just want to know what happened. First you vanished for 2 days, and then you collapsed when a ninja finally finds you near the forest. You've been asleep for another 2 days since then." Naruto's stomach dropped. If the Hokage found out the truth, he'd never be allowed to become a ninja. Thoughts spun wildly as he climbed back onto the bed and looked at the Hokage, bracing for a lecture. But the old man was still smiling. "Oh, don't look so grim, Naruto. I've known you to sneak off sometimes, but never for this long. I was worried. The world's a dangerous place, especially for a boy on his own. That's why I have ninja watching out for you." Naruto tried to take in what he was hearing. "So, you're not mad?" "Heavens no. You've had a difficult life. It's not surprising that you'd find your own way. The real surprise was how thoroughly you fooled the Chunin on duty. They didn't notice anything was wrong until you failed to show up in the morning. A bundle of old clothes under the blanket was enough to trick them. Quite impressive." Naruto blinked. "You were worried? About me?" "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" The Hokage paused, watching him closely. "Do you know what it means to be Hokage?" Naruto tilted his head. "You're the leader of the village because you're the strongest ninja." The old man chuckled. "That's what most people say. But there's more to it than strength. A Hokage must care for every person in the village. He must protect them and look after them." Naruto blinked, unsure he'd heard right. "All of them?" "It's not easy," the Hokage said gently. "But you learn to look past people's faults and find the good in them. Everyone in the village has value. You just have to see it. Like the ninja saying goes, look underneath the underneath." Naruto frowned. "But what about all the mean people?" The Hokage's face became more serious. "I'm not happy about how they've treated you, Naruto. You're just a boy with a good heart. They're not bad people, though. They've made bad choices, that's all." Naruto thought about that. He'd seen villagers act cheerful when they didn't think he was around. They laughed, talked kindly, and seemed like good people. That was why he wanted them to notice him. He just wished they were kind to him too, or at least didn't glare or send him away. The Hokage glanced over with a thoughtful expression. "Do you know the story of the fourth Hokage?" "What?" Naruto blinked. "Wasn't he the one who died defeating the demon fox?" "Something like that. Do you know why he was chosen as Hokage?" Naruto shook his head. The old man nodded and continued. "A lot of people wanted the title. It was never a contest, but I was growing older, and though I hadn't announced it, everyone expected me to choose a successor soon. I watched many ninjas try to prove themselves. They boasted about their missions, challenged anyone they could, and constantly showed off their skills. But they were chasing recognition, not responsibility. None of them would have made a good Hokage. He paused, letting the words settle before continuing. There were only two I believed had true potential. One was a quiet man. Very strong, very smart. He wanted to learn every jutsu in existence. He didn't show off like the others because he didn't need to. Everyone knew what he could do, and no one dared challenge him. The second was a younger man. He was cheerful and full of energy. He liked games and spent time with children from the village. He had strength, yes, and a sharp mind, but his goal was to protect others, not impress them. He never showed off unless there was real danger. That second man was Minato. I chose him because he didn't seek power for himself. He only wanted enough strength to keep the village safe. When the Ninetales attacked, many lives were lost. But Minato found a way to stop it, even though it meant he wouldn't survive. He didn't want to die. He had more he wanted to do. But he gave everything he had for the people he loved. That's why he was Hokage. The old man fell quiet. His eyes drifted toward the window, lost in memory. Naruto sat still, trying to understand it all. He fidgeted, shifting in place. He wasn't sure what the story was supposed to mean. Maybe the Hokage had forgotten he was there. He considered slipping away. Naruto! The boy jumped. Why, yes. Did anything happen to you while you were gone? He thought Naruto had run away again. He hadn't. But he couldn't tell the Hokage about training either. Not yet. Even if the old man said he cared, Naruto didn't want him getting mad. That would hurt worse than anything. Naruto shook his head. Then why were you so tired? I've never seen you sleep that long. Naruto shrugged. I was just tired. I didn't sleep much while I was out, and I wanted to get home and go to bed. But I ran into that ninja and couldn't get back up after. It wasn't the full truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Hopefully, that was enough. The Hokage studied him for a moment, then nodded. I see. Well, you're dressed, so let's head home. He stood and offered his hand. Naruto hesitated before reaching out. The Hokage wrapped his fingers around the boy's hand, giving a soft tug to help him off the bed. Together, they walked down the hallway. Naruto didn't speak. He couldn't. His thoughts were spinning. How many times had he seen parents walk with their kids, holding their hands, so they wouldn't wander off? How many times had he wished someone would do that for him? Now the Hokage was holding his hand. Maybe not like a dad, he was way too old for that, but maybe like a grandpa. That felt close enough. The Hokage walked him all the way home. The villagers still looked at him the same way, but their stares didn't feel quite as heavy without the whispers. Naruto wished the Hokage could walk beside him every day. At the apartment, Naruto unlocked the door and let the Hokage inside. He gave the nicer chair to the old man and took the wobbly one for himself. His place wasn't anything special. Just a table, 2 folding chairs, a faded couch, and a crooked bookshelf. He was grateful the bedroom door was closed. His floor was probably a mess, and if the ninja had checked his bed, they'd know about the clothes stuffed beneath the blanket. The silence stretched. Naruto didn't know what the Hokage wanted. But the longer he stayed, the more nervous Naruto became. If he noticed the signs of training, everything could fall apart. You go to first elementary, right? Naruto nodded. How do you like it? Naruto frowned. It wasn't great. The teachers didn't like him. He always got the worst projects and was called lazy or slow. The other kids avoided him. If someone was late to class, that was who sat next to him. If he tried sitting next to someone on purpose, they'd move as soon as they noticed. Everyone treated him like a freak. The lessons weren't much better. They spent 2 weeks learning multiplication with 2s and 3s. Naruto had understood it the first day. If he was supposedly the worst in class and even he got it, then didn't that mean everyone else was bored too? And his new teacher was especially grouchy. Sleeping through class had been one of his best ideas. She could yell all she wanted. Naruto had mastered the art of ignoring it. Of course, Tia. I smoothed this final section with care to preserve your original tone and Naruto's earnest voice, refined the flow, removed harsh language, and softened punctuation for consistency with the rest of your story. Here's the revised version. I see. Naruto looked up, puzzled. He hadn't said anything yet, but the Hokage was watching him with a quiet, sad expression. From inside his robes, the old man drew out a pipe and took a few slow puffs before speaking again. Naruto, have you ever thought about attending the Ninja Academy? Naruto stiffened. Did he know? His stomach churned as he shook his head. Sure, he wanted to be a ninja. But the academy? They'd never let him in. Not even through the front doors. Would you like to go? Of course. He didn't even have to think about it. It's already a few months into the school year, the Hokage said, but I can pull a few strings to get you in. How would you feel about starting soon? Really? Naruto shot to his feet, thrilled. Yes. He clapped both hands over his mouth a moment too late, realizing what he'd said, and in front of the Hokage. He braced for a scolding, but the old man only chuckled and took another puff from his pipe. Then it's settled. Today is Saturday. You'll have Sunday off and start at the academy on Monday. You're a little younger than most who transfer. They usually wait until they're 9, but we've made exceptions before. I'm sure we can arrange something. He stood, stepped toward Naruto, and ruffled the boy's hair gently. At the door, he paused and looked back. Take care of yourself, Naruto. And remember, there are people who care about you and worry when you disappear. The Hokage's words stayed with Naruto after he left, but the boy couldn't think of anyone else who looked at him with anything but contempt. He remembered the orphanage. Kagura-sen always looked like she wanted him gone. He'd learned quickly to avoid her between meals. During meals, he ate fast so she couldn't scold him or give him chores. The other kids learned too. They learned to stay away. Kagura-san was friendly until someone played with Naruto. Then they'd get the same harsh treatment he did. It hurt most during mealtime. Everyone sat in silence while Naruto was there. Then the moment he left the room, chatter filled the halls. He used to wish he was like the other kids. That someone would tuck him in, tell him things would be okay when he cried, or hug him when he scraped his knee. When he was 5, he ran away, slept under benches, behind buildings, or anywhere that felt safe. Then a ninja found him and brought him to his new home. They showed him the apartment, the food shelf, and explained that someone would check on him once a week. If he wanted to stay, he'd have to keep the place clean and do his chores. He did. He never wanted to go back. Cooking for himself wasn't a problem. Kaguru-sen used to assign him to the kitchen as punishment. He'd handled hot pans and sharp knives from the start. He had burns and cuts, but they healed fast. Compared to that, cooking alone was easy. At least no one shouted or startled him. The food was mostly ramen, thanks to the ninjas, but he got used to it. There were so many different flavors. He didn't mind after a while. That was the only thing that got better. The loneliness stayed. More adults gave him the same cold look Kaguru-sen had. They said awful things. If he tried to play in the park, someone always dragged the other kids away. Sometimes the kids didn't even know the adult, but they left anyway. He'd end up alone in the sandbox. School had started around the time he left the orphanage. It wasn't fun, but it gave him something to do. School lasted year-round except for July. Sundays were off, and Saturdays were half-days. He wasn't usually bored unless it was a weekend or holiday. Those were the worst. Families gathered together while he was stuck on his own. The only people who talked to him were the ones who said cruel things. He cried a lot, ran away sometimes, but he always came back. Where else would he go? That had been his life for a year until he met Mendo and his gang. Things had improved since then. And now, finally, he was going to the Ninja Academy. He'd be turning 9 this year, just like the other students. If he were like everyone else, he would have had to wait another year. But he didn't care. He would prove to everyone that he could be a great ninja. That night, he dreamed of the 4th Hokage laughing and playing with a group of children. When Yondaime spotted Naruto standing off to the side, he walked over and invited him to join. It was the best dream he could remember having. Chapter 2. The academy teachers have arrived, Hokage-sama. Sarutobi looked up from his desk, nodded to Teona, and signed the final line on a funding request for wall repairs in the northern sector. Rising slowly, he made his way toward the conference room, already considering how best to handle what came next. The academy teachers weren't going to like the decision. Asking them to watch over Naruto while continuing to teach was a lot, especially given his recent escape. But the boy needed stability. For years, the Chunin assigned to monitor Naruto had never failed to locate him within hours. This last attempt was different. If the child couldn't find something to root himself in, some sense of purpose, Sarutobi feared the village would lose him for good. At least in the academy, the teachers could be given orders. If they refused, they could be replaced. Elementary school teachers could only be paid and politely requested to behave professionally. Here, the Hokage held authority. "Welcome, Hokage-sama," came the greeting in unison as he entered the room. He motioned for the dozen teachers to remain seated, then walked slowly to the front. His eyes scanned the group. Would they be able to put aside their feelings and treat Naruto fairly? "I imagine you're wondering why you've been called here without warning," Sarutobi began. "Your efforts with the current students have been commendable, but I'm assigning you one more." Confusion flickered across their faces, though none spoke. Trained shinobi knew better. This isn't a typical situation. The academic year is well underway, and the student in question is younger than most beginners, only 8. He won't be eligible for Genin rank until 12, same as the others. This transfer is for safety reasons. I expect you to teach him the equivalent of his elementary education, so he doesn't fall behind. Curiosity now mingled with concern. Sarutobi drew a quiet breath before giving them the name. You all know of him in some form. I expect professionalism. Set aside emotion. He is beginning his 3rd year with basic reading, writing, and early arithmetic. I want you to build on that so he's prepared to advance with his cohort. Is that clear? Nods followed, though Sarutobi knew the real question was still coming. It was Yamato who asked, carefully, "May we ask who the student is?" "Naruto Uzumaki." The air changed instantly. Anger, disbelief, and resentment rippled through the room like a wave. Sarutobi remained calm. His disappointment simmered just beneath the surface. They couldn't see what this boy had endured. No family, no friends, no kindness. Just fear and hatred for reasons he couldn't begin to understand. "There must be some mistake," said Taimano, his voice cutting through the low murmurs. "That child, he carries the demon. He can't be allowed to learn the ninja arts." "Enough." Sarutobi's voice, though aged, held weight. The room fell silent. "Are you truly shinobi? Then act like it." Several teachers looked away, uncomfortable with their own reactions. "I said Naruto will be trained as a ninja. He is not the fox. He is a boy. A boy who lives alone, carries a burden he doesn't understand, and receives none of the compassion a child should. If you can't treat him kindly, then treat him fairly. That is the expectation, in the classroom and beyond." He paused, letting the words settle. "I will assign a chunin to escort him Monday morning. You may choose where he sits and how you structure his lessons. But if I learn of any mistreatment, you will answer to me. Consequences will be severe, depending on the offense." His gaze met every pair of eyes in the room. One by one, they looked away. Sarutobi nodded once. "Submit your teaching plan to Teona's desk before you leave." Without another word, he left them behind. He knew Naruto would still face cold stares and whispered judgments. But inside the academy, at least Sarutobi could enforce a measure of control. And with ninja training underway, the boy might one day learn how to defend himself. Not just with jutsu, but with strength of spirit. Something told him Naruto would need both. Araka Yumino sat among his fellow instructors, the same stunned expression mirrored on every face around him. Naruto Uzumaki. That name alone brought a storm of emotion. The boy carried the burden of the Nine Tails, the same force that had destroyed so many lives. Araka had always sworn to protect Konoha and follow the Hokage's orders without question. But this? "What are we going to do?" asked Ruto Yamato. He was the one who usually found the words first. Araka watched the older man sigh and push a few stray strands of hair behind his ear. "We can't defy the Hokage," Ruto said. "Naruto Uzumaki is to be accepted as a student." The room stirred uneasily. "But how can we?" "That boy. Surely there's—" "Stop," Ruto snapped before the murmurs escalated. "The decision has been made. The only question now is how we're going to handle it." He let out another tired breath. "I'm not thrilled about it either, but we have a responsibility. Whatever history that boy carries, he's still a child. If we're going to follow the Hokage's order professionally, we must stop referring to him by what he contains." Ruto had always been the steady voice among the academy's chunin instructors. Araka had looked up to him since he started teaching 4 years ago. If anyone were ready for Jounin, it was Ruto. "I won't teach him," said Gojo Taimano, eyes narrowed with challenge. "Neither will I. Not in my classroom." "I won't do it either." The refusals came quickly. Araka sat silently, too stunned to add his voice. You're not just disagreeing with me, Naruto said, fury beneath his calm tone. You're refusing the Hokage. He ordered us to allow the boy into the academy, Gojo argued. He said we could decide how. Let him sit in the back with busy work while the real students learn. That's all I'm saying. I'm not taking him in. Arika felt the logic of it, but something about it didn't sit right. Naruto scanned the room. Does everyone else agree? One by one, the instructors nodded. Voices muttered their approval. Naruto sighed. Very well. I'll take Uzumaki into my class. Arika winced on his behalf. Naruto taught ninja third year, the most demanding class in the academy. Ninja first year was mostly physical training, laps, push-ups, basic taijutsu, weapons practice. History lessons helped students recover from the physical strain. Ninja second year required students to train on their own. They built strength and agility while studying disguise, trap identification, ninja sayings, and chakra theory. Camping skills wrapped up the year. Third year, though? That was tough. Early months focused on theory, stealth, ambush strategies, gathering intel. Students stayed in the classroom except for sparring and throwing drills. After winter break, things shifted to field work in the village, survival trips, and trap training in the forest. By spring, they were preparing for the Genin exams. Adding an extra student, especially one like Naruto, would stretch Naruto thin. Arika thought about how much easier it would be for someone like himself, teaching first years. The class structure had more flexibility. Before he realized it, he was speaking. I can take him when you need support. The room turned to him in surprise. Even Naruto paused, blinking at him. Everyone knew Arika had lost his entire family during the Ninetales attack. His pain ran deeper than most. Naruto's smile was soft. Thank you, Arika. I appreciate that. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. I'll develop his curriculum. The rest of you focus on maintaining a respectful tone and ensuring your students treat Uzumaki-san with basic decency. Arika rose slowly, still wondering what he had just committed to. Saturday and Sunday felt like the longest days ever. Naruto was too excited about starting at the Ninja Academy to sit still. After the Hokage left, even pranking didn't sound fun. Not really. He wandered aimlessly for an hour, then slipped away from his ninja watcher. Only one shadow this time. Strange. Had they changed their system? 2 pranks later, he was deep in the woods, stretching and training. Risky, sure, but he figured he was already enrolled. How much trouble could he really get into now? He kept his senses sharp, ready to detect anyone nearby. All he wanted was more practice with Hinge. He swore to himself that this time, he wouldn't faint. The first time had to be a fluke. He gathered his chakra, pushed it outward, and braced for the pain. It came quickly, sharp and blinding, like knives all over his body. Then something inside him snapped. The transformation hit. His eyes stayed shut. He couldn't move yet. The stabbing faded, but now his skin felt stretched and tight. Any movement triggered another flare of pain. He stood there, frozen, waiting for it to pass. Minutes ticked by, or maybe it was only seconds, before he could move again. He stumbled to the edge of the stream and looked down. The same blonde woman stared back. He transformed. Still, the whisker-like scars were there. Naruto took a deep breath and tried to shift back. Nothing happened. He didn't panic. Not yet. He focused again, tried letting his mind wander. Ramen flavors danced through his thoughts. Which one would he eat when he got home? What jutsu would he learn next? Still nothing. His nerves were spiking, but he kept calm and tried another approach. He gathered his chakra and let it sit, quiet and untouched, as he thought about who he was, not what he looked like. Blue eyes. Spiky blonde hair. A grin that didn't care what anyone thought. A stubborn heart. That unshakable drive to prove them all wrong. The whisker-like scars that wouldn't fade, no matter what. The way he couldn't sit still in class, and how he preferred running wild through the village instead of staying indoors. With each thought, the chakra began to move. It pooled into his stomach. The pain returned, sharp and sudden, but Naruto didn't fight it. He waited. When it passed, he looked down again. His reflection was his own. He kept practicing. Each time, the pain eased a little. Eventually, the ache started settling in his muscles, stiffening with strain. He stopped and ran through stretches to loosen up, then began his usual routine. By nightfall, he was able to jog home instead of limping back. He took a roundabout path to avoid being seen near the woods, just in case. Cooking miso ramen took 3 whole minutes, but it felt like forever. After eating, he collapsed into bed. Sunday came, and Naruto ditched his watcher again. He set up a couple of pranks with long delays, just for fun, then headed out to train in a different spot. Not much changed. The pain still hit hard, but he could now shift into his female form and back without losing control. Almost instantly. Before sunset, he returned home. The last 2 hours were spent doing laundry and chores. He didn't want to give anyone a reason to complain. Tomorrow, he'd be a student at the Ninja Academy. Monday arrived, and Naruto was up with the sun. He showered, ate breakfast, brushed his teeth, and ran a comb through his spiky hair. By 7 o'clock, he was standing outside his apartment, waiting for the escort the Hokage had promised. He knew where the academy was. He'd passed by it plenty of times. But he didn't want to go without permission. Besides, he had no clue where he was supposed to go once he got there. So he waited. And waited. And waited some more. He figured he was early, but by 9 o'clock, he was fidgeting. School started at 8. If no one came by 9:30, he was going without them. It wasn't going to be his fault if he was late on the first day. The ninja finally showed up a little after 9. Naruto wasted no time. He told him off for being late, demanded to know what kind of ninja was sloppy enough to delay an escort, and complained about how important first impressions were. The ninja said nothing. Naruto expected that. It still felt better to yell. They started walking, and Naruto was forced to follow behind at a slow pace. It took 20 minutes to reach the academy. Naruto knew he could have made it in 5, tops, if he used the rooftops. His watchers knew that too. He must be trying to make me late on purpose, Naruto thought bitterly. By the time they reached the front gate, he had run out of complaints. He kept his head down and began to mumble under his breath. He'd learned that if he slouched, shuffled his feet, and muttered nonsense, most people assumed he wasn't paying attention. It made it easier to listen in or watch people without drawing suspicion. The yard outside the academy was bustling. A group of students, probably around 9, were jogging along the perimeter in a neat line. The kid at the back was struggling, but keeping pace. Naruto noticed the leader glancing at a nearby teacher every few steps. They weren't allowed to run faster than the slowest person. That was a rule. The instructor had a faint smile on his lips. He looked proud of his students. Then his gaze shifted and settled on Naruto. That faint smile vanished instantly. The change was subtle, but Naruto had grown good at reading the difference between casual glances and cold ones. There was a weight to certain looks, a sharp edge. He could sense them, even when his back was turned. By the time they stepped inside the building, Naruto felt that edge settle between his shoulders like a warning. Maybe Ninja Academy wasn't going to be any better than First Elementary. He didn't like that thought. They walked down the main hall and climbed a staircase to the second floor. The ninja stopped in front of the second door on the right. A deep, calm voice was speaking inside. It stopped when the door opened. Naruto tried to peer around his escort's legs to see who was talking. "Your student Yamato-sensei," the escort said. Then, without ceremony, the ninja stepped aside and nudged Naruto forward into the room. He stumbled, recovered, and took a good look at his new classmates. Everyone was older than him. A year or two, at least. Around Nendo's age. A third-year class, no doubt. The stares hit him like darts. The kids in elementary school had treated him like a freak. He was someone to whisper about and avoid. These kids were different. Their eyes weren't just wary. They were angry. "What did I do? Is it because I'm late? Stupid ninja." "Ah, Naruto Uzumaki, correct?" said a man at the front of the classroom. Naruto turned his attention to the teacher. He wore dark blue and a green vest that Naruto recognized instantly. That was the standard gear for ninja watchers. He knew exactly what kind of man this was. His voice, which had sounded gentle before, now carried a harder edge. Naruto nodded without speaking. He didn't even breathe, afraid the teacher might kick him out on sight. "Please take a seat in the back corner. I'll finish the current lecture first, then explain what you're expected to do." He pointed to a spot next to a boy with brown hair pulled back in a short ponytail. The boy didn't look happy about the arrangement, but he didn't seem dangerous either. Naruto made his way over and sat down quietly. Yamato-sensei resumed his lecture. While the instructor spoke, Naruto looked around. The classroom was tiered, with 3 rows of desks arranged like steps. Each desk had 3 chairs. The teacher's desk sat at the lowest level, cluttered with books and papers. The windows were on the far side of the room, opposite from Naruto's seat. He turned his attention to the boy beside him, who was scribbling notes. A thin book sat nearby, labeled Ninja Sayings. Curious, Naruto leaned over and flipped through a few pages. "A ninja must look underneath the underneath. The true ninja art is trickery to fool the opponent. A ninja must always hide their emotions and never show their tears." Naruto blinked. It all sounded serious and boring. The boy noticed him reading and shot a glare in his direction. Naruto grinned and closed the book apologetically. Naruto tried his best to focus on the lecture Yamato-sensei was giving. Diagrams were sketched across the chalkboard. There were layouts of trees and terrain. The teacher was explaining different ambush tactics used by shinobi. About half an hour later, Yamato handed out worksheets. Each one described a scenario, and the students were supposed to write out how they'd set a trap for incoming ninja. As the students began working, Yamato walked up the stairs toward Naruto and gave a small wave, motioning for him to follow. "I'm stepping outside with our new student," he told the class. "I expect everyone to stay on task while I'm gone." Naruto trailed behind him, unsure of what was happening. The classroom had been full of glares, and Yamato didn't seem much different from the teachers he had before. Why was he placed in a class with kids older than him? Wasn't Ruto-sensei supposed to be the one guiding him? They turned down the hall and entered a separate room with a circle of desks. Yamato led them down the steps, choosing a seat and gesturing for Naruto to take one across from him. The teacher didn't say anything at first. He just stared at Naruto, whose eyes were glued to his hands. The boy tried not to fidget, but it wasn't easy. There was tension in Yamato's gaze. Some frustration, maybe even anger. Not all of it felt aimed at him. That was a new kind of look. "You've just started your 3rd year of elementary, right?" Naruto glanced up and nodded. "Then we've got a bit of a challenge." Yamato's voice was calm, but measured. "Most incoming academy students have finished 4th year. They're expected to read and write well and know their basic math, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. They also have a working knowledge of the Fire Country's history, which helps set the stage for shinobi training. From what I understand, you're still learning multiplication and just starting division. Is that accurate?" Naruto nodded again, unsure where this conversation was headed. "You're in my class because there isn't a younger level academy cohort right now. But I can't teach a full 3rd year curriculum and give you constant attention at the same time. You'll be learning independently for most subjects and doing separate exercises when we're out in the practice yard. Does that make sense?" Naruto frowned slightly, but nodded again. He wanted to learn to be a ninja, but it seemed like he needed to catch up first. That was fine. He could do that. He wasn't the fastest student, but maybe if he worked hard, he could learn faster. "I put together a work packet for you," Yamato continued. "Each day, while the others train on advanced techniques, you'll work through your own assignments. In the yard, they'll be practicing sparring and weapon drills, but you'll start with laps, push-ups, and sit-ups, like a first-year student would have. Got it?" Naruto gave a firm nod this time. Yamato handed him a thick folder filled with worksheets. The first pages included short history stories and questions at the end. The math started with basic multiplication and division. Further into the stack, the stories got longer, the font smaller, and the math became more complex. Naruto squinted at a few of the instructions. They were a little tricky, but they made sense. He thought maybe he could finish most of the packet by the end of the day, if he didn't fall asleep during class. Homework had never been high on his list, but if this was the path to ninja training, he wasn't going to waste time. He nodded again and looked at Yamato expectantly. "If you joined the academy at the normal time," Yamato said, "you would have spent a full day learning what it means to be a ninja trainee, how our system works, and what's expected of you. You'll get that lesson in a few years, but I'll give you a brief version now." Naruto leaned in, listening closely. "At the academy, you're considered a ninja in training. First year is about building physical strength and endurance, along with shinobi history that isn't taught in regular schools. Second year helps you apply those skills: disguise, traps, chakra awareness, and how to think tactically. Third year is about real-world readiness, stealth, survival, information gathering, setting traps, spotting ambushes." Naruto's eyes sparkled with interest. It sounded amazing. He wanted to learn it all. "When your 3rd year is complete," Yamato continued, "you'll take an exam to qualify for the Genin rank. Genin are the lowest level ninjas, but they're still official shinobi. From there, you're placed on a 3-person team led by a Jounin, the highest rank in active field duty. Between those 2 ranks is Chunin, which is where your academy teachers currently stand. He hesitated like he wanted to add something, but instead gave a slight nod. Do you understand? Naruto nodded. With that, Yamato stood and headed back toward the classroom. Naruto followed quietly. As they stepped through the door, Naruto noticed the students had clearly been chatting while the teacher was gone. But the moment Yamato returned, they were silent again. That alone made them different from the kids at First Elementary. His old classmates could never manage that. Naruto returned to his seat and set the folder on his desk. He pulled off his backpack for the first time that morning and opened it. He'd packed light, unsure what he'd need. It was just a few pencils and a thin notebook. He opened the folder and got to work. The assignments weren't hard, not yet. And Naruto didn't bother listening to the rest of the lecture. He had his own mission now. The message was clear. Until he finished what Yamato had given him, he wouldn't be part of the main class. Wouldn't get to learn how to be a ninja. That was fine. He would finish it. All of it. It had been a week since Naruto Uzumaki started at the Ninja Academy, and every time Naruto entered the staff room, heads turned. There was no need to ask. Every glance carried the same question. Iraka Umino had a clear view of Naruto's class from his own practice yard. He'd seen the blonde boy running laps while the other students practiced kunai drills. Occasionally, a kunai strayed in Naruto's direction. They were training weapons, blunted, but Iraka had caught himself noticing when one found its mark. He hadn't cheered, hadn't smiled, but he'd noticed. Naruto never said much when asked about the boy. It went fine, he would say. Nothing unusual. And for days, that had been the routine. But today, Naruto looked different. He entered without greeting anyone, dropped into a seat, and nodded silently at the voices welcoming him. His eyes were distant as he pulled a green folder from a stack of papers and began marking it with a red pencil. Most of the instructors returned to their own grading, but Iraka kept watching. From 2 seats away, he noted the rhythm of Naruto's hand. It was quick at first, then slowing. The older Chunin shook his head occasionally, muttering softly under his breath. Iraka couldn't make out the words. When he reached the final page, Naruto paused, staring at it longer than seemed necessary. He set the folder aside and began marking the line paper essays. An assignment on ambush strategies, judging by the titles. Iraka, with a ninja second-year class, usually had the largest stack of papers to grade. That day was no exception. The other instructors from his cohort had already packed up and left, but Iraka lingered, watching as Naruto shifted his attention back to the green folder with a look more thoughtful than before. 10 minutes passed. Naruto didn't move. Iraka's curiosity got the better of him. He stood, walked over quietly, and leaned in for a closer look. The page Naruto was staring at was a long division worksheet. It was something Iraka recognized from late third-year elementary curriculum. Since when does basic math get that fascinating? Iraka asked. Naruto jumped in surprise. It was rare to catch him unaware. He blinked, then let out a long breath. Iraka, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Didn't see you there. Sorry. Got caught up in my thoughts. No apology needed, Iraka replied. I just finished grading my trap identification papers and saw you were still here. That's not like you. Usually you're the first one out the door. Naruto waved the explanation off. Nothing serious. Just a puzzle I wanted to solve before heading home. He gestured at the paper spread out before him. Tell me, what do you think of this? Arika picked up the packet, flipping through pages of math problems and short history passages with questions. The handwriting was clearly a child's. It had large, uneven numbers and slightly crooked letters. Looks like third-year elementary level to me. What's the mystery? Ruto ignored the question and asked a different one. When do kids typically learn this kind of math? Arika glanced at the page again. Late third year. Just before they start word problems and get ready for fourth. Exactly. Ruto pulled one of the worksheets from near the back of the stack and held it out. Now, if a student from late third year were working on this, what would look different about their answers? Arika frowned at the worksheet, clearly confused. He looked closer, trying to recall how long division was typically taught. I guess I'd expect to see each step written out. You know, like the multiplied number below the dividend, followed by the subtraction. He pointed to the top of the page. Like here, 52,752 divided by 42. Most third-year students would write down 42 under the 52, subtract it, and show the 10 before bringing down the next digit. But this, it just shows the 10. No working. Is that what caught your eye? Ruto nodded. Exactly. And he doesn't use a calculator either. Arika tilted his head. 9-year-olds entering the academy could do it that way, maybe. Mid, fourth year elementary for sure. But what are you getting at? Ruto looked at him, voice even. Who started in my class last week? And what grade was he in? Arika blinked. You mean Naruto Uzumaki? I do. Arika stared, waiting. Ruto continued calmly. I reached out to his old teacher over the weekend. She said he missed a lot of last year's lessons. Sleeps through most of this year. Lowest scores in the class. Based on that, I expected him to be slow. Maybe disruptive. He gestured to the papers in front of him. So I gave him busy work, stuff I figured would take weeks to finish. I even drafted a few punishments that wouldn't cause trouble with the Hokage. But he handed this in at the end of the week. Fully completed. And he didn't fall asleep once. Ruto ran a hand through his hair, clearly unsettled. I thought he'd get bored and start causing trouble. When he gave me the packet, I assumed he'd filled in a few answers and guessed the rest. But he's correct on 95% of it. The ones he missed are just a few digits off. I can see exactly where he slipped. He glanced over at Arika. On the first day, I told him to only work on the packet during class. He promised. So when he handed it in, I asked if he had worked on it at home. He looked me dead in the eye and swore he hadn't. He was pretty vocal about it, too. Might have been lying, but it didn't feel that way. Arika leaned against the desk, silent. It was hard to know what to say. If this were any other student, he'd be asking all kinds of questions. He would be trying to figure out how far their potential went. Was this natural talent? Something learned elsewhere? A fluke or something repeatable? Was it just math? Or did it extend to history, taijutsu, shuriken technique? How strong was his endurance? His speed? His adaptability? Gifted students were rare. When they appeared, teachers usually scrambled to support them. But this was Naruto, the boy who carried the 9 tails. Could someone like that solve math problems so precisely? Or was this proof of something darker? Something that cast doubt on everything the Hokage believed? I don't know what to do next, Ruto admitted. If he picks this up so quickly, I'll need to increase the difficulty. Word problems. Ninja-style calculations. More advanced history too. But I don't want him to be bored when he enters first year officially. He hesitated, then added, I get the feeling he's been difficult at the elementary level because he's bored, not because he's trying to cause problems. He leaned back and sighed. Last week, during outdoor drills, I gave him the standard first-year routine, 10 laps and 25 push-ups and sit-ups. Not in the front yard either. It was the backyard. Twice as big. Irika raised his eyebrows. He finished halfway through kunai drills, Ruto said. Said I looked busy, so he ran the whole set again. Voluntarily. Most kids would have just waited out the rest of the session, assuming they even finished the first set. I didn't expect him to last 2 laps, let alone the entire routine. He shook his head again. Later, during sparring, I told him to sit and watch. He didn't nap. Didn't look around for distractions. He sat through the entire hour, watching every move. No daydreaming. Just focused. Irika didn't speak for a long moment. That wasn't the story he'd expected. Irika's jaw tensed as he listened to Ruto. It was like the older Chunin had forgotten. Forgotten what the Ninetales really was. Forgotten the destruction. Forgotten the lives it took. Ruto was speaking calmly about the boy who carried that monster's chakra. As if Naruto were just another student. The kid's not what I expected, Ruto said thoughtfully. If he keeps working at this pace, I might talk to the Hokage about letting him enroll properly next year. He's picking things up fast, but I don't want him getting too far ahead. I'll need to hold off on kunai and taijutsu training, at least for now. Irika couldn't take it anymore. Wait, Ruto. You're saying you want the Ninetales to enter the academy early? Ruto blinked, suddenly aware of Irika's reaction. Most of the teachers didn't even want him here, Irika pressed. And now you're telling me he's ready to skip ahead like he's some honor student? Just last week, Ruto had been firm but cautious. Now he sounded almost supportive. Did the demon have hypnotizing powers they didn't know about? Ruto paused and placed a hand on his younger companion's arm. No one else wanted him in their class, so I accepted it. Now that he's in my charge, I'm going to make sure that I do my job right. He isn't the demon fox. The Hokage is right. Ruto stood and shuffled things around on the desk. This boy, Ruto continued, has no anger in him. No hatred. He smiles even when others look at him like he's something to be feared. I've tested him, challenged him, made him train alone. But he shows up. He works hard. He pays attention. And he hasn't lashed out, not once. Ruto looked him in the eye. I remember what the Ninetales chakra felt like. I was there. I know what it is. I've been watching him carefully. I don't sense it, Irika. Not a trace. Irika said nothing. All we have here is a child, Ruto added. One without a home. You understand that, don't you? Irika didn't respond as Ruto gave him a small nod and picked up the folder. Think about it, Irika. And try getting to know Naruto. You won't find a demon there. Yonde must have sealed him too deep to be seen. If he didn't have those scars on his cheeks, you'd never know him from another child except for his ability to pick things up quickly. And I'll find out just how far that ability can go. Ruto patted his colleague on the back and left Irika alone in the staff room. Irika sat alone. No, this wasn't right. Ruto was one of the sharpest instructors in the academy. The demon fox was thousands of years old, the most powerful demon lord in the underworld. How could a newborn child hold such a creature at bay? Maybe the thought of Ruto being hypnotized hadn't been a simple flight of fancy. It was the only answer Irika could think of that would explain this total turnaround. If someone like Ruto could be convinced, could be fooled, then Naruto was dangerous. He was manipulating people. Irika leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. There was no doubt now. The Night Tales had done something to Ruto. Irika Umino was going to prove it. Chapter 3. The Ninja Academy was going better than Naruto had expected. The boy who sat next to him, Hitori Yurite, turned out to be pretty decent. He introduced himself the second day before class and even let Naruto flip through some of his books during lunch. Most of it was over Naruto's head, but a few sections made sense. Hitori liked giving him tips, ways to get ahead, so he'd be ready when he officially started as a first year. Physical training had been a surprise. Naruto had been assigned laps and basic exercises, while the older students practiced kunai tosses. They weren't even halfway through when Naruto finished his routine, so he decided to start over. He'd barely begun his second round when a blunted kunai flew his way. It hurt when it smashed against his arm. He grabbed it from where it stuck in the ground after hitting him. He threw it back and glared when it barely sailed halfway. The older kid smirked. A few more kunai followed before he finished his laps. Each time, he tried to toss one back, but they never reached their mark. By the second day, he started dodging them. He watched the older kids, and when one motioned towards him, he realized they were tossing a kunai. He braced for the throw and stepped aside when he could. He still couldn't throw worth anything, though. Hitori gave him pointers after class, showing him the grip and angle for proper aim. That night, Naruto snuck into the tool shed and borrowed a few kunai for practice. By the end of the week, getting pelted during laps became routine. Most students sent a kunai his way at least once. Sometimes he dodged, sometimes he didn't, but now, when he threw one back, it reached its target. Not always with precision, but it landed. He still needed to work on aim, but it was becoming a game more than anything else. The classroom started to ease up. The glares faded. Naruto figured being everyone's personal target was useful. It gave them a way to take out their frustration and be done with it instead of hating him for the rest of the year for who knew what. The packet Yamato-sensei had given him had been rough at first, especially when new topics came up. But Naruto pushed through, finishing by the end of the week. He wanted to work on it at home, thought about cheating just a little to get it done faster, but he'd made a promise. Mindo had a saying for moments like this: "Never promise anything you don't plan to keep." Naruto repeated it to himself and stuck to it. Mindo said a man wasn't worth anything if his word couldn't be trusted. Instead of homework, he dodged his watchers in the evenings, played a prank to misdirect them, and trained in secret. During class sparring, he took mental notes, jutsu stances, footwork, combos. He tried them out later in the woods. He also kept practicing hinge, which was coming along better now. Still painful. Still slow. But better. Over the weekend, he met up with Mindo and the gang to celebrate his start at the academy. They grabbed some ice cream to share in a familiar back alley. Taiko pulled him aside and warned him about a few students to watch out for, names Naruto made sure to remember. He hadn't seen the group in a while, and it felt good to laugh again. Sunday was solid. Monday, he entered school with a grin and greeted Hitori with a loud, cheerful "Morning!" Hitori just waved wearily and kept his head on the desk. "Looks like someone didn't sleep much," Naruto muttered, smirking as he dropped his bag. Before he could sit, Yamato-sensei arrived and called him up to the desk. Only a handful of students were in the room, but the teacher still kept his voice low. "I graded your packet," he said. "You got a 95% accuracy score. That's excellent work. Your math comprehension is ahead of most kids your age." Naruto took the green folder automatically, blinking in surprise. No one had ever complimented his schoolwork before. "You handled the history readings well, though the answers were right in front of you. This week I'm giving you a proper history textbook. I'll test you on it Friday. Notebook allowed. You're allowed to read it at home." Naruto nodded, still wrapping his head around the compliment. "I'm also giving you a new math packet," Yamato continued. "It's different from last week. You'll read a short paragraph and use the information to solve a question. The first half involves basic operations. You'll choose between multiplication, division, addition, or subtraction. The second half uses combinations of those. Some questions may have 2 parts. And remember, show your work even if it's just adding 2 plus 2. I need to see the steps." Naruto nodded again after a moment of thought. It sounded a bit tricky, but he'd probably understand it once he got started. He wouldn't know for sure until he tried it. He thanked Yamato-sensei and walked back to his seat with the old green folder, a history book, and a thinner blue folder for his next assignment. Class began without issue. Naruto opened the new packet and started on the first problem. "There are 4 apples on the table. 3 are eaten. How many apples are left on the table?" He scoffed. "That's it? Yamato-sensei made this sound hard." He breezed through the early pages, barely thinking. The real challenge didn't begin until multiplication and division came into play. "There are 24 pieces of candy and 4 friends. If they shared equally, how many pieces does each friend get?" Naruto stared at the worksheet. It took a moment, but he figured it out. Just divide. That was easy. After that, the rest of the questions rolled by like nothing. Before he knew it, Hitori was nudging him and telling him it was time for physical training. When the class returned, Naruto opened his history text. It was boring. After class, he groaned about it to Hitori, who just laughed and told him to start taking notes. "Write down the stuff you think the teacher will ask," he said. "That way, you only have to remember your own notes, not the whole book." Naruto wasn't thrilled by that advice, but he hated the idea of reading it twice even more. Once was enough. Hitori headed off, and Naruto slowly packed up. He didn't take his usual sprint home. Instead, he walked, debating whether to dive back into history or start training instead. He hadn't even finished the first of 10 chapters, and the test was coming up fast. "Naruto Uzumaki, correct?" The voice pulled him out of his thoughts. Standing nearby was a Chunin with a navy blue uniform and green vest. Naruto had been at the academy long enough to recognize that navy blue was Chunin and black would be Jounin. This one had dark brown hair gathered into a spiky ponytail and a scar across his nose. His brown eyes weren't filled with hatred. Naruto had seen enough of that to recognize it instantly. Something in his gaze made the blonde's stomach twist. It wasn't hate, but it was sharp. "I'm Irika Umino. I teach one of the ninja second-year classes," the man said. Naruto nodded, staying polite. "I heard you've been at the academy for a week. Just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. It's pretty rare to have a student your age here, especially one working independently." Naruto hesitated. No one asked questions like that. Even his own academy teacher, the best teacher he ever had, never asked how he was doing. People weren't nice like that. Not unless they were up to something. The only person who'd ever asked how he was, without a hidden motive, was the Hokage. Still, he didn't want a teacher at the academy mad at him. It's sometimes tough, but mostly I'm not too bored. Yamato-sensei seems okay, he said, grinning and scratching the back of his head. It wasn't the best answer, but he didn't want to say anything wrong. Arika nodded. I see. Then came the look. It wasn't the usual anger or disgust, but it still made Naruto's spine crawl. Something about it made the blonde's hair stand on end. You know your class will be going on extensive field trips in a few months, right? For survival and Genin prep. Naruto blinked. He hadn't heard that. No, he said quickly. Well, Arika said, when they do, I volunteered to supervise you, so the rest of the class isn't disrupted. I thought I might introduce myself to you. Naruto frowned, biting back his frustration. He was trying. He was working hard. He had a few months. He'd aced that history test. He'd be ready. Still, it was oddly considerate for Arika to seek him out. If only that cold, sharp feeling in his eyes would fade, Naruto might have felt grateful. Arika seemed to notice his discomfort. He offered a polite farewell, and said they'd talk later. Naruto bowed quickly, thanked him, and ran home. Tonight, training could wait. History came first. He'd sneak out after dinner to practice taijutsu and kunai drills, but right now, he had a book to beat. Arika made a point of greeting Fox Carrier at least once a day. He didn't enjoy it. That sharp edge of resentment hadn't dulled. But if he needed to befriend the brat to uncover what he had done to Naruto, then that was what he'd do. At first, Naruto squirmed any time Arika approached. It was obvious he was nervous, wary, and uncertain. It took a full month before the boy stopped reacting like he was bracing for a scolding. Another week passed before Arika invited him out on a Saturday half-day. Arika chose Ichiraku Ramen mostly for practical reasons. It was close to the academy. The food came out fast. As a chunin, no one would deny him service, even if they usually gave Naruto a cold shoulder. He'd planned to grab a few bowls and take them to the park, somewhere neutral, somewhere quieter. Instead, the owners, Tucci and his daughter Ayam, welcomed Naruto with surprising didn't hesitate. No sidelong glances. No second guesses. Arika glanced at Naruto, half wondering if they mistook the boy for someone else just because he was with a shinobi. Or maybe they simply didn't recognize him. Tucci gestured to the counter, offered the Fox Carrier a seat without hesitation, and the blonde's eyes lit up. This is my first time eating inside a restaurant, he'd said, practically bouncing onto the stool. Arika blinked, realizing just how strange that was. He didn't comment. What he did notice was the appetite. One bowl turned into 2, then 4, then 9. Arika hadn't planned for a full meal marathon, but if ramen earned the demon's trust, then maybe it was worth the dent in his wallet. But he learned not to take the blonde out unless the kid was paying for his own food. After that day, something shifted. Naruto started opening up. Whenever Arika asked how things were going, the boy answered with stories. School, training, the kunai games with his classmates, ideas for better traps, complaints about history textbooks, and a lot about pranks. And always, requests for Ichiraku. Arika listened, patiently, observing. But despite all his attention, he couldn't find a single sign of jutsu, hypnosis, or manipulation. It was frustrating. Worse, Ruto seemed more taken with the boy than ever. He rarely spoke to other instructors, but with Irika, he opened up. All Ruto wanted to talk about lately was Naruto Uzumaki. Irika kept his responses calm, polite, encouraging, even. But every compliment about Naruto made his resolve tighten. If the Ninetales had done something to Ruto, it had buried that trick deep, and Irika was determined to dig it up. Luckily, November had arrived. With it, the ninja third-year survival trips were happening. Each week, a different class spent time camping, learning how to navigate and survive in the wilderness. Irika was hoping that by having Naruto in his class, he would find out what had happened to Ruto. Whatever the boy had done, Irika would be ready. First, though, he had to find Ruto to ask when his class was scheduled for their first outing. Some teachers left early in the week. Others waited for classroom review days before heading out. Irika finally tracked him down at a training hall, one of Ruto's usual Sunday haunts. "There you are," Irika called, jogging over. "I've been looking for you." Ruto turned, sword in hand, and paused his movements. "Irika? What's up?" He sheathed the blade and stepped to the side bench, wiping sweat from his face. Irika followed, his questions already forming. "Nothing much," Irika said lightly. "Just realized the survival trips start next week and wanted to check when Naruto will be in my care. Does your class head out Monday or Tuesday? Also, does he have assigned work I should keep an eye on, or do I need to prepare something?" His tone was polite, neutral. No need for Ruto to know he'd been waiting for this. "Oh, I forgot to let you know," Ruto said, sounding genuinely apologetic. "Thanks for offering to take him, especially considering—" Irika didn't respond to the implication. Ruto coughed and continued, now sounding slightly uncomfortable. "I meant to say, I do appreciate the offer, but Naruto will be going with the class this week and next week for the trap-laying exercises. I'm undecided about the stealth and ambush segments. Stealth might be fine. Ambush? I'm not sure he's quite ready." Irika blinked. That wasn't what he expected. "You're bringing him on both trips?" Ruto nodded. "He's earned it. He's handled everything I've given him so far. I thought the dry history books would slow him down, but he just keeps reading faster. His average score across assignments is 93%. He got an 88 last week on a ninja second-year math sheet, the projectile angles and calculations." Irika glanced away briefly as Ruto continued. "And the kunai drills during laps? You remember. Even after I told the class to stop, they keep doing it like it's some kind of challenge. Naruto doesn't get upset. He just shrugs it off. First, he could barely dodge. Now he's catching throws and sending them back without even stopping. He's still only 9, but that's something." Ruto paused, then added, "You've seen the kind of pranks he pulls. The traps are detailed, complex. All I've had to do is shift the intent from paint and confetti to real mechanics. He's adapting fast. And he's quiet, careful. I think he'll handle the stealth exercises without trouble." Irika exhaled slowly. "I thought you didn't want him getting too far ahead." "I still don't," Ruto admitted. "But I've never given him proper instruction in throwing weapons, and he's already on par with some of my second years. He's caught up to his current classmates in history, and I may have to start him on advanced math before long. If the survival trips go well, I'll talk to the Hokage. Basic taijutsu, ninjutsu theory, and information gathering would all be done. He could pass 3rd level." Irika hesitated. Students who passed before age 11 were rare. Those who did had the backing of elite clans and years of training. Naruto wasn't one of them. Even if his mind kept up, his body shouldn't be ready. It took time to build endurance, strength, chakra control. Quietly, Irika said, "That's a lot to take on, especially for someone without a background." Ruto caught the hesitation and gave Irika a steady look. "You still think this is about what he carries?" Irika didn't answer. "I thought you'd come around," Ruto said. "You've been speaking to him regularly. You've even taken him to lunch." Irika nodded once. "Still, what happens if the other teachers don't accept it? Or if the villagers notice how quickly he's advancing?" Ruto frowned, and for the first time, Irika felt a glimmer of hope. The older teacher's anger seemed to waver, his gaze drifting inward as thoughtful silence settled between them. Irika held his breath, wondering if his words had finally landed. If Ruto might see the danger, might recognize the risk. The silence stretched, and Irika's chest lightened. Then Ruto spoke. "Thank you for pointing that out, Irika. I hadn't considered how it might look to the others. I'll still take Naruto with the class, but I'll think carefully about our options before speaking to the Hokage." Irika's hope dropped like a stone. That wasn't what he meant. He stayed quiet, watching as Ruto picked up his towel and started for the exit, lost in thought once again. And as the door closed behind him, Irika felt the problem settling deeper. Even though he'd finally voiced some of his concerns, he still couldn't shake the feeling that things were getting worse. This had been the hardest, most frustrating school year of Naruto's life. It was also the most fun he'd ever had. His classmates still didn't talk to him much, except for Hitori Yuri, but at least they didn't seem to hate him. And kunai and shuriken practice had become the best part of his day. His aim had improved quickly. After learning how to catch kunai, he moved on to mastering shuriken techniques when they introduced those in October. Dodging flying weapons with spins and flips had been a blast, and even after he figured out how to catch them, his classmates started throwing at trickier angles, sometimes when his back was turned. The history texts were miserable, but Naruto had been determined to join the class on survival trips. Whatever time Yamato-sensei gave to complete reading assignments, Naruto cut it in half and still scored around 90% on the tests. It came at the cost of his hinge practice, but that could wait. For now, he focused on keeping his taijutsu and throwing skills sharp. The math problems were starting to make his head hurt, but he pushed through. And it had all been worth it. He got to go on the week-long survival trip. Yamato-sensei even bought his supplies when the shopkeepers refused to sell to him. Naruto finally owned a real set of kunai and shuriken, not the blunted ones he'd borrowed before. During the trip, he learned to hunt small animals using only his ninja tools and set simple traps for quail and rabbits. Hitori was his partner most of the time, though he occasionally worked with others. He made sure no one got left behind. They had a few tense run-ins, like a wolf in the trees and a cougar near the ridge, but he followed directions from whoever was his partner, and they got out safely each time. The following week focused on trap making. They trained in wooded terrain, setting up more complex structures. To Naruto's surprise, he already knew more trap styles than most of his classmates. He just had to swap out his usual prank supplies for ninja tools. Kunai replaced color bombs, logs replaced mud buckets. Easy. On Thursday and Friday, teams of 3 defended colored flags at hidden campsites, while also attempting to capture enemy flags. Naruto, Hitori, and a girl named Mitsun passed the test. Naruto's trap perimeter locked down their sight tightly, and Hitori stayed behind for defense. He and Mitsune went out and claimed another flag together. Their plan was simple. Naruto would scout traps while Mitsune handled any opponents. Unfortunately, they ran into Shikuma, one of the top taijutsu fighters in the class. Mitsune held her own, but it was clear she was starting to lose. Naruto stepped in. Shikuma hadn't expected Naruto to know how to fight and definitely wasn't ready for two opponents. Naruto's fighting style was unpredictable. It was street scrapping woven with taijutsu fundamentals. It wasn't refined. He never had a professional lesson in his life, but it was fast and awkward and impossible to read. His size only made it harder to counter. Together, he and Mitsune dropped Shikuma quickly. After returning with a flag, Mitsune grilled him on how he knew taijutsu. Hitori laughed, and Naruto had to challenge him to a match to prove his skills. The rest of the weekend became a sparring gauntlet with both teammates, trading blows and tips. Yamato-sensei spoke to them afterward, asking about Naruto's fighting ability. Much to the blonde's shock, he offered private evening lessons once December began. First, though, they had to finish the stealth and ambush practical. Luckily, Naruto still had the same team. For the ambush portion, they had 4 days. Then they'd switch roles and defend. Those being ambushed had a scroll they were supposed to get back to the main campsite that Yamato-sensei had set up. The first 2 days, they were supposed to make camp and defend from defense attacks. They had the second 2 days to get back to the main camp. If the team lost the scroll to stealth attacks, they could still get a few points by returning a second, smaller scroll that could not be taken during the first 2 days. Naruto's group, Mitsune, Hitori, and himself, were assigned to go after Satsuko, Kinji, and Kuga. Kuga was the strongest taijutsu fighter in the class. Kinji was sharp with trap detection and solid in combat. Satsuko, their leader, was a long-range specialist with kunai and shuriken. Hitori took lead, and Naruto didn't mind. He was just glad to be included. They split up to locate the enemy team and regroup after a few hours. Naruto found signs of other squads, but no trace of Satsuko. Mitsune had the same luck. But Hitori found them. He sent Naruto back to scout the traps without being spotted. When Naruto returned, he mapped the enemy camp's layout, and Hitori began plotting the attack. Most teams expected ambushes at night. It was easy to hide in the dark. Hitori decided to hit just before dawn, using low light and heavy tree cover to their advantage. The traps were clever, but Naruto knew how to slip past them. Hitori let him lead. They moved in half an hour before sunrise. Kinji was on watch, but looked bored and tired. Mitsune was quick-footed and quiet, and when the sun began to rise, she slipped into camp. If anyone got caught, the team would have to turn around and try again. No fighting was allowed until the 3rd day. Unfortunately, Satsuko had kept the main scroll. Mitsune had gotten past the perimeter, but the team leader spotted her. Without giving up her teammates, Mitsune surrendered and let Kinji escort her out of camp. Kuga and Satsuko were on high alert for Naruto and Hitori, but both stayed in cover, waiting until their opponents let their guard down. That moment came sooner than expected. Hitori made his move next. Since Mitsune had already seen Satsuko with the scroll, they'd switched it to Kuga, who hid it in his back kunai pouch. When Kuga stepped away to use the bathroom, Hitori used a transformation jutsu to disguise himself as Satsuko and intercepted him outside the camp. She asked for the scroll back, saying Kinji had spotted enemy scouts and she needed to reposition it. Since the team thought only Kuga had left, they wouldn't suspect a mid-shift swap. Hitori sealed the trick by claiming Satsuko had used a clone to maintain appearances inside camp. Kuga nodded and handed over the scroll. Satsuko told him to return normally, and that she'd sneak back in when Kinji gave the all-clear. The disguise worked perfectly, and Naruto led Hitori out of trap range without a hitch. Mitsune met them in the woods and celebrated the success. They spent the rest of the day refining ambush tactics and surveillance strategies. Since they didn't know what route Satsuko's team would take, elaborate traps weren't an option. Naruto offered some quick deploy setups while Hitori and Mitsune tracked the enemy's movements. Once Mitsune got a read on their path, she'd relay it to Naruto, then help with trap placement while Hitori flanked from behind. The goal wasn't harm, it was clean capture. Their weapons were dulled, and knockouts weren't guaranteed unless they hit a lucky spot. Naruto suggested a series of net traps and trip wires for easier containment, and Hitori agreed. They practiced taijutsu through the afternoon and rested until sundown. If Satsuko figured out that scroll teams could technically leave the designated camping area as soon as it hit midnight, she'd probably take advantage. She had been smart enough to relocate the camp after Kuga's mistake. Naruto's team spent a bit of time scouting the new area. But Satsuko was not smart enough to anticipate the midnight rule. That worked in Naruto's favor. He had plenty of time to set some traps along a likely interception path. Mitsune and Hitori stayed behind to watch the camp. The opposing team didn't head out until late morning. Mitsune regrouped with Naruto to let him know they were circling east. She helped Naruto finish the more likely trap zone, and the two waited for Hitori to rejoin them. An hour later, they had visual. Kuga led, flanked by Satsuko and Kinji in a triangle formation. Naruto rolled his eyes. Kuga watched the front. The others scanned the sides. But none of them were watching their rear. Kinji spotted some traps and tried to maneuver around them. That left Kuga stepping right a few Kinji missed. Once Hitori and Mitsune launched their attack, Naruto rushed ahead to place netting and trip wires. They worked great together. Satsuko ran out of projectiles and was snagged in a net quickly. Kuga charged Hitori in fury, but tripped over a wire, giving Hitori just enough time to strike and knock him out. With his team down, Kinji was easy to take down. Naruto led the still awake and tied up Satsuko back by kunai point as his teammates hauled the other two back to camp. They passed the exercise with flying colors. The next day was theirs to rest before they took the scroll. Kuga complained bitterly about cheating, but Yamato-sensei shut him down. It was a really nice break, even with the occasional insult from Kuga. With the scroll in hand, Naruto's team set off to defend. They had reviewed their opponent's mistakes during their downtime. Hitori chose a detection-based camp layout. They rotated shifts, 2 on watch, 1 asleep with the scroll. To prevent infiltration by Hinge, they set up a basic hand sign protocol to confirm identity. And instead of hiding the scroll, they left it visible. Easier for enemies to spot, but also easier to keep track of. Satsuko's team had failed when they lost sight of it. Attempts came. None succeeded. On the second night, they broke camp at midnight and sprinted toward the main site. By switching to tree routes, they hoped to cut their arrival time to half an hour. Naruto kept up easily, treating it like roof hopping with smaller landing zones. They reached the camp without incident. Only one Chunin instructor was awake. When he saw Naruto, his eyes sharpened with hatred. Naruto didn't react. He was used to it. But his teammates clearly weren't. "Did we do something wrong, Sensei?" Hitori asked, glancing between Naruto and the teacher. No, the man replied flatly. Most teams don't think to return this early. Yamato-sensei is asleep, but wake him and report in. Naruto stayed quiet as Hitori and Mitsune exchanged uncertain looks. They gave a polite thank you and headed off. I wonder what that was about, Hitori muttered. Did you prank him recently? Naruto shook his head. Mitsune didn't press the question. They found Yamato-sensei and woke him without trouble. He was surprised but not upset. He told them to inform their opponents as well. He led them to Satsuko's team and delivered the news. Kuge exploded. What? It's not even dawn! How can they be back already? The rules say you can't return until the third day begins, Yamato-sensei explained. That happened at midnight. If you run, the distance takes just over 30 minutes. The stunned reactions made him soften a bit. Don't feel bad. Only a few teams think about that detail. You're not the first to miss it. Satsuko and Kinji took the loss gracefully, if begrudgingly. Kuga, though, directed his frustration squarely at Naruto, glaring at him like he was the reason they'd lost. Hitori and Mitsune didn't get the same treatment. Naruto shrugged it off, like he always did. He followed his teammates to an open spot and laid out his sleeping bag. They still had 2 days left at camp, and they were all tired from running. Chapter 4. Naruto hadn't gotten nearly enough sleep. At 3 a.m., the entire camp was roused without warning and sent back to the academy. The teachers split off to locate the other student teams still scattered in the woods. Something had happened in the village. An emergency, they said, but no one would explain. Back in the classroom, Naruto dropped into his seat and passed out the moment his head hit the desk. He'd only managed 2 hours of sleep at the main camp, and before that, 24 hours of near-constant movement, taijutsu drills, ambush scenarios, trap layouts, night watch rotations. His body felt like it belonged to someone else. He woke to the familiar sound of Hitori's voice and a hand on his shoulder. The sun was almost at its peak when Naruto blinked blearily and stretched. What happened? He muttered. The Uchiha clan's been massacred, Hitori said quietly. No one knows by who. Or if they do, they're not talking. One survivor. He's unconscious. Mitsune, sitting nearby, guessed it was missing Nin from Stone. Her theory sparked quiet debate, but Naruto only half listened. The idea of an entire clan disappearing didn't feel real. He'd never spoken to the Uchiha much, but they were important. You'd think Konoha's police force would have talked to him about all the chaos his pranks brought. They were always present, always watching, but none ever talked to him. He wondered who the survivor was, then let the thought fade. Sleep still tugged at him, and the classroom felt impossibly heavy. Classes were canceled and students weren't allowed to leave on their own. While everyone else waited for a guardian to pick them up, Yamato-sensei escorted Naruto home without saying much. There was quiet everywhere. 2 days off from school followed, but Naruto's training plans crumbled when Yamato told him he wasn't allowed outside the village. Konoha was still under emergency protocols, and even harmless pranks were strictly forbidden. Naruto understood. People were grieving. Laughs could feel like insults. Still, it didn't make those 2 days any less boring. Irika sat quietly as the academy instructors argued across the staff room, their voices rising with each theory about the massacre. Everyone had something to say. Grief bled into anger as they speculated about punishments for whoever had wiped out the Uchiha clan. He didn't know what to think. The announcement had shocked the village. Silence first, then suspicion, and inevitably, blame. To Irika's discomfort, many had initially pointed fingers at the Nine Tails. He knew it wasn't possible. Ruto had confirmed that Naruto had returned to camp with his teammates before 1 a.m. He'd been accounted for. Some still argued that a creature like the fox could have tricked the Genin or used instant transport to commit the massacre. But even the loudest theorists had to admit no one had heard a battle. If the Nine Tails had struck the Uchiha, they wouldn't have gone quietly. So they waited. A&Bs scoured the surrounding lands for signs of fugitives, or for Uchiha Itachi, who was missing. They didn't know whether they'd find a person or a corpse. Sasuke, the only known survivor, remained in a coma. Still, the academy staff felt compelled to gather. Gojo Taimano was among the few who clung to the Nine Tails theory. Others leaned toward Orochimaru, the infamous Sannin-turned-traitor. Irika, for his part, hadn't formed an opinion. The facts were too few. "We can't let the fox escape justice," Gojo bellowed. "If we wait for the A&BU, it'll slip through our fingers." Irika sighed. The man seemed to love to yell. The young Chunin had no love for the demon, but he couldn't help but think that Gojo was taking this a bit far. The idea just wasn't feasible. Before anyone could rehash the same debate again, a quiet voice broke through the room. "I think not, Taimano. Naruto Uzumaki is not at fault." The room froze. The third Hokage had entered. Irika felt a wave of relief and gratitude that he hadn't participated in the argument. One glance at Sarutobi's expression made it clear. The Hokage was furious. Several instructors shifted in their seats. A few looked genuinely ashamed. "With all due respect, Hokage-sama," Gojo began, still defiant. "How can we be sure? The boy carries the demon. We've taught him our jutsu. Who's to say he hasn't used them for his own ends?" Irika stared at him, stunned. Had Gojo gone completely mad? "Sasuke Uchiha woke this morning," the Hokage replied flatly. "The killer was not a beast. It was his own brother, Uchiha Itachi." The silence held for one breath and then shattered into shouting. Dismay, confusion, outrage, disbelief. Irika stayed still, watching the storm unfold. He spotted Ruto near the door. He hadn't been in the meeting earlier. He must have arrived with the Hokage. Good, Irika thought. Given the way Gojo had been talking about Naruto, Ruto wouldn't have taken it well. The Hokage raised a hand. The room quieted again. He explained what the A&BU had discovered. Itachi had mastered a forbidden technique, the Mangekyo Sharingan. Whether it had driven him to madness, or simply given him the power he'd waited for, the result was the same. He had murdered his clan in a single night. According to Sasuke, Itachi's only reason was that he wanted to test his strength. It fit. Irika hadn't been able to imagine how an entire clan could fall without alerting the village. But if the killer had been trusted, had used that trust to strike quickly and precisely, then silence made sense. Shock would have kept them from reacting in time. With the truth revealed, the village shifted out of full alert. The academy would resume the next day. NBU still searched for Itachi, but at least now they knew who to track. As the meeting broke up, Irika nodded to Ruto and watched the other instructors file out. Most wore expressions of lingering disbelief. Gojo lingered in the corner, face twisted with something darker. When the room was nearly empty, he turned and stormed out. Irika watched him go, unsettled. He wasn't sure what his colleague was planning. Naruto hissed, shaking out his right hand while juggling his wooden short katana to his left. The chop had landed squarely on his fingers. That was Ruto's way of teaching him never to loosen his grip. Naruto glared at his bruised hand and winced. For 3 months, Ruto-sensei had been giving him private lessons in weapon handling. Just when Naruto thought he had the hang of it, his teacher would introduce a new counter, a new technique, or another unexpected way to break his stance. It felt like a personal challenge. And Naruto wasn't backing down. They'd started with taijutsu, but after sharpening Naruto's movements, Ruto had told him to keep practicing solo. His scrappy, unorthodox style was something most ninjas wouldn't expect. The basics taught at the academy would only take him so far. The advanced training would come later as a genin. Naruto had been proud, until Ruto told him the private lessons were done. He'd exploded. "You promised to teach me to fight," he shouted, arms flailing. "You can't just quit. You said—" Ruto blinked in surprise. Naruto was halfway to an apology when the man started laughing. After that, the lessons resumed, but with swords instead of hand strikes. Ruto even said Naruto could call him by his first name outside class. That alone had made Naruto feel taller. They trained in Kenjutsu all through December and January, while the class studied information gathering. Naruto now participated fully in regular lessons, taking math packets and history books home like everyone else. Kunai and shuriken practice had shifted to sparring drills, and he was finally allowed to join. He got knocked down constantly. The older students took pleasure in flooring him, but each week he stumbled less. He was getting faster, stronger, and maybe, just maybe, he'd win a match soon. February brought more survival trips, interrupting sword training, but Naruto didn't mind. Most of the class was reviewing history they'd learned years ago. He was learning it for the first time, and doing better than half the room. If only he was progressing that fast with a blade. "Keep your grip, Naruto," Ruto reminded him, sidestepping a wild swing. "Switching hands was clever, but you can't fight left-handed. Work through the pain. Never drop the hilt unless you have no choice." Naruto nodded, biting back the ache in his fingers. He reset his stance. They went at it again. By the time Naruto stumbled home, he was exhausted. Ruto was soaked with sweat, but still walked easily. It was like the fight had woken him up instead of worn him down. Naruto showered, ate, and then headed back to the field to train on his own. The watchers who used to trail him had vanished sometime in January. He hadn't asked why, just enjoyed the freedom. He was too busy for pranks anyway. He trained for 2 more hours, working through sword drills, then throwing practice, then hinge. Another shower, then straight to bed for a few hours before academy. His days were full, and he liked them that way. Every morning felt a little easier. Every spar, a little sharper. The next week, Ruto handed him a real blade. Not wood. Not dulled steel. A proper katana. Naruto held it like it was sacred. Another month passed. Ruto taught him hinge and kawamari. That was when Naruto realized he'd been doing hinge wrong. According to Ruto, it was supposed to be an illusion. Touch it, and it vanished. Naruto stayed quiet. He didn't mention the time his female transformation had felt solid, had been solid. He wasn't sure what that meant, but he wasn't ready to explain it, either. Kawamari was easier. No need to relearn everything, just technique. By April, they'd moved on to Bushin, practicing ninjutsu in the woods where they wouldn't disturb the other students. Naruto grasped the chakra shaping easily. He knew how to pull a bit of energy outside himself. But turning that chakra into a full body? That was trickier. Naruto was mid-explanation when a new voice interrupted. Well. Playing favorites, are we, Naruto? Naruto turned. A large man stood at the edge of the clearing, smirking. He recognized him instantly. Gojo Taimano. Another teacher. One who made his skin crawl. What do you want, Gojo? Naruto's tone had gone cold. Naruto didn't like it. It reminded him of snowfall that came right before a storm. Oh, nothing serious. Gojo's voice was light, almost friendly. But the glint in his eyes didn't match his smile. Just surprised to see a colleague giving private lessons. You know how frowned upon that is. Wouldn't want to be seen playing favorites. I have the Hokage's permission, Naruto said flatly. And unless you need something, I'd like to get back to my student. They stared at each other. Naruto edged back instinctively when Naruto stepped between him and Gojo. Still protecting the brat, Naruto? Where's your sense? That thing shouldn't be here, let alone taught in secret. It should have been dealt with long ago. You and the Hokage are blinded. Whether you agree or not, you will respect our leader's orders. Leave. Naruto had heard worse words on the street, but no one had ever stood up for him like that. Gojo glared at him, a look full of loathing. You'll regret teaching that monster, he growled. Just wait. He turned and left. Naruto didn't move for a long time. Naruto watched the spot where Gojo disappeared and said nothing. I'm sorry about that, Naruto, Naruto finally said. Let's call it a night. I'll walk you home. Naruto didn't ask questions. He skipped his usual training and spent the evening reviewing his history book. He had a test in 2 days, and one more run-in with Gojo was one too many. By the time Naruto reached the academy the next morning, the encounter with Gojo was already forgotten. Lunch break came, and the blonde parked himself beneath one of the training yard trees with his usual thermos of ramen. He was halfway through his second mouthful when instinct told him to duck. A kunai whistled past his ear and thunked into the trunk just behind him. Naruto blinked. That hadn't been a training tool. It was a live blade. If he hadn't moved, it could have been bad. Hey, brat! Watch where you're sitting. You're in the way! Kuga, Naruto thought bitterly, watching his classmates stomp toward him. Naruto shrugged, scooted aside, and went back to eating. The older boy snatched his kunai without apology. Kuga had been on his case ever since the ambush exercise. Most of the class had followed his lead, and Naruto was back to dodging attacks between lessons. Kuga, though, was the worst. He never missed an opportunity to test a strike or toss a weapon in Naruto's direction. At least in elementary school, his classmates hadn't known how to hit where it hurt the most. A moment later, another punch flew past his head. Naruto sprang up, thermos still in hand, and did a quick backflip to keep his ramen safe. After getting splashed numerous times, Naruto found that the faster he flipped, the less broth he spilled. It had taken practice, but now, not a single drop. He started to retreat, but Kuga swept his legs from under him. Naruto hit the ground hard, then rebounded to his feet using the force of the fall. His ramen was still intact. What was that for, idiot? He snapped. Hitori had warned him to ignore the bullies. If you don't react, they'll lose interest, he'd said. Usually Naruto tried. But now, Kuga went too far. He almost spilled his ramen. I don't need a reason, Kuga growled. You slow us down. How are we supposed to pass the Jinin exams next month if we're stuck babysitting you? You're dead weight. Naruto narrowed his eyes. You couldn't pass the exam with or without me. All you know how to do is fight. You actually need a brain to be a Jinin too. Kuga's face twisted with rage, and Naruto braced himself. He was fast, but Kuga was bigger and stronger. The kid was one of the top taijutsu students. Naruto had barely avoided a direct hit when a hand caught Kuga's neck strike midair. Naruto looked up. Hidori stood between them, calm and unimpressed. That's enough, he said coolly. If a 9-year-old can rile you up that bad, maybe you're not ready for Jinin either. Maturity's part of the job. Kuga snarled, yanked his arm free, and stormed off. Naruto let out a quiet breath of relief. Why do you do stuff like that? Hitori asked as they headed back to the building. You know Kuga could hurt you if he wanted to. He was asking for it. Maybe, but you're not the one who can give it to him. I could take him, Naruto insisted. Hitori raised a brow. You can't even beat me. I struggle sparring against Kuga. You haven't learned basic taijutsu yet. What's Yamato-sensei teaching you? Hey! He says I don't need it. My style is unpredictable and surprising. He says it's better until I'm a Jinin and get a Jounin instructor for the advanced stuff. So what are you learning now? The 3 basic ninjutsu and kenjutsu. Hitori was quiet while Naruto slurped the last of his ramen. Then he said, You know, the higher forms of taijutsu build off the basics. Sure, being unpredictable helps, but that works both ways. If your opponent uses basic form and you've never learned it, then you're the one facing the unknown. Naruto mulled that over. But Sensei says I'll learn the advanced stuff later. And with a sword, I'd have more reach. Less effort, more damage. He shrugged and dropped the subject. Hitori didn't push. By the time they returned to class, Naruto had shifted back to quiet focus. Most of the students kept their distance. Not because they hated him outright, but because Kuga had made being friendly a liability. A few like Mitsune still offered kindness when they could, but Naruto wasn't worth the risk to them. When the school day ended, Naruto gathered his things, ready to sprint home, tackle his history review, and meet Ruto-sensei for training later. A gentle hand rested on his shoulder stopped him short. Hitori, he asked. What's up? It wasn't like him to linger. Hitori didn't mind teaming up with Naruto in class, or dragging him out of trouble when Kuga got aggressive, but once the school day ended, they acted like strangers. Hitori's parents didn't approve of Naruto. They weren't cruel, but they didn't look past what they saw with their own eyes. A loud, reckless boy from nowhere. As long as Hitori didn't talk to him after class, didn't mention extra time together, they didn't ask questions. Hitori lingering at the end of the day with Naruto was surprising. You're taking the Gen exam, right? He asked. Naruto nodded. Yamato-sensei's taught you ninjutsu? Another nod, this time with a scowl. His bushin and hinge were still a mess. And you're caught up on your studies? For the most part, Naruto replied. Why are you asking? Hitori hesitated. I don't think you're going to pass. Naruto opened his mouth to protest, but Hitori raised his hands quickly. Hold on. I don't mean you're hopeless. I just think you'll need more to make it. Maybe Yamato-sensei's aiming for you to graduate next year with kids closer to your age. But honestly, he met Naruto's eyes. I'd choose you as a teammate over half this class. You're reliable. You don't give up. You listen. That matters more than flashy jutsu. Naruto blinked, unsure how to respond. If Yamato's right about your unpredictable style, that's good. But if I taught you the basics, just enough so you could recognize what the other guy's doing, you'd have a real shot. It took Naruto a second to realize what Hitori was offering. And then it hit him. He lit up like a festival lantern and broke into a happy dance right there in the hallway. Hitori raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. Once Naruto calmed down, the older boy started laying out training plans like it was a mission briefing. When he tried calling Hitori, "Hitori-sensei," the older boy laughed and immediately vetoed it. After a short debate, they settled on Hitori-senpai. Naruto couldn't wait to start. Chapter 5. Despite all of Hitori-senpai's help, Naruto had bombed the Chunin exam. Spectacularly. His Bushin hadn't worked, and Ruto-sensei had pulled him aside afterward to explain why it wouldn't have mattered even if it had. Students under 10 couldn't graduate without agreement from at least 3 instructors and a valid reason for early advancement. Naruto's hinge was still shaky, and there were gaps in the basics he'd skipped. Wouldn't he rather be placed with kids closer to his age? Naruto hadn't enjoyed how right Hitori-senpai had been. Instead of a single month off, Naruto now had 2 before the new year started in July. None of his classmates he was on speaking terms with had failed. Some were already Chunin. Others had moved into civilian schooling. Naruto was alone. Kenjutsu lessons were down to twice a week. Hitori-senpai was a Chunin now. Not only would he have missions, but he was officially barred from teaching. Instruction was reserved for Chunin or higher. After just 1 week, Naruto was climbing the walls. He visited Mendo and the gang once, but tried not to show up too often. A prank would have helped, but he was trying to be a good ninja. Good ninjas didn't prank civilians. At least, he'd never seen one do it. And there was only so much solo training he could squeeze in before it got boring. "Hey, look! It's the brat!" Kuga's voice rang across the training field. "What's wrong, loser? Upset you didn't pass the big kid's exam?" Naruto turned toward him with a grin he didn't feel. He'd held his own against most of his sparring partners by the end of the year. Kuga was the exception. He was never paired with him during drills. Naruto had been itching for this opportunity. Street fights weren't limited like sparring. There were moves he'd wanted to try, and this was the time. Who cares about a dumb exam?" Naruto shrugged. "If you passed it, it probably wasn't that hard." Kuga's 2 teammates stopped laughing. Both were solid fighters. One favored weapons, the other tag-teamed with Kuga in close-quarters combat. Together they formed a textbook heavy combat trio. The kind built for frontline survival while reinforcements regrouped. Naruto had a brief hope they'd let him face Kuga alone. Then he had to dodge a fist. Hitori-senpai had been right. Knowing your opponent's form made a difference. Naruto had added some new counters to his style, but stayed true to Ruto-sensei's advice. Stay unpredictable. With Kuga's moves familiar now, he could dodge, block, and pivot more smoothly. A few moments in, he landed a solid hit to Kuga's gut. Kuga staggered back, clutching his stomach. Then he snarled and charged harder. Naruto took a few hits before catching the rhythm, but once he had it, He moved inside Kuga's guard and nailed him with a roundhouse to the side. The older boy reeled, and Naruto didn't hesitate. He aimed low. The groin hit landed true, and Kuga dropped to his knees with a strangled gasp. Naruto allowed himself a brief smirk. Finally, he forgot about Kuga's teammates. They responded fast. The one with kunai opened with a barrage of live steel. Naruto was grateful for all those earlier training attacks. The instinct stuck. He scrambled to dodge, juking left and right as the air filled with deadly edges. Then came the second teammate with taijutsu. A foot arced toward Naruto's head, followed by a knife hand jab at his knee. He ducked, spun, blocked, and nearly missed the kunai aim for his chest. He felt the wind of it. He dropped low and heard the thunk of metal meeting flesh. Naruto froze. His body ran a frantic check. Scrapes, bruises, yes. No fresh pain. No deep impact. Not him. He jumped back into a crouch and checked the others. The kunai thrower was wide-eyed, unmoving. The second teammate was bleeding. The blade had sunk just below his neck, angled toward his collarbone. Blood trickled down his chin. He stood frozen, both hands clasped around the handle like he couldn't believe it was real, even though he could feel it. Then came the sound. Choked. Sharp. The boy collapsed backward, unconscious. The kunai thrower shouted and rushed toward his teammate. Kuga, still on the ground, stared with blank disbelief. Then his eyes found Naruto's. Surprise shifted into hatred. That was all Naruto needed. If the boy wasn't dead, he needed help. If Kuga caught him now, things would only get worse. Naruto-sensei would know what to do. Naruto ran. Iruka watched Naruto finish his report, detailing the strengths and shortcomings of the other academy classes. Ever since the older teacher began advocating for a fair understanding of Naruto Uzumaki, his standing among the other ninja had taken a hit. His reputation within the ranks had eroded, but strangely, his respect in the eyes of the Hokage had only grown. That came with consequences. Naruto found himself assigned more missions, more responsibilities. It was more than he'd ever been asked for. Privately, he'd even questioned whether the Jounin exam was worth it. The rank came with higher pay, yes, but it also came with more work, more risk, more excuses for the Hokage to pile things on. This past week had been brutal. With his own class finished with their Jounin exams, Naruto had spent hours observing every instructor below his level. The Hokage wanted full assessments of their teaching styles and detailed feedback on every student in the academy. 3 years. 4 teachers per year. Roughly 10 students each. Iruka didn't remember the last time he'd seen Naruto smile. Except, once, at the end of a Kenjutsu lesson with Naruto. Genuine. Not for the first time, that tiny crack of warmth towards the container set Iruka's teeth on edge. It was that smile that had triggered their latest fight over dinner. Naruto held firm. As always, Naruto was Naruto. Not the Nine Tails. Iruka had refused to budge. The argument had spiraled. Again. He wanted to believe Kyuubi had manipulated his mentor somehow. That Naruto was caught in a genjutsu or some kind of influence. But despite months of watching, digging, and studying, he had no evidence to take to the Hokage. No proof. Just a gut feeling and the ghost of grief. Iruka had thought the Jounin exam would be his chance to expose Naruto's unworthiness. When Naruto tried to pass him, Iruka could challenge the decision and show the man how blind his mentor had become. But then Naruto surprised everyone. He didn't pass the container. Irika had cornered him afterward, asked why. And Naruto, calm and precise as ever, had listed Naruto's weaknesses one by one. He even said he was glad Naruto hadn't mastered Bushin. Some trainees could pass without it if there were extenuating circumstances. But for Naruto, staying in the academy longer was a good thing. The worst thing a teacher can do, Naruto had said, is pass a student who isn't ready. It had crushed Irika's last real chance at leverage, and it had left him bitter and ashamed. He'd said things in that fight he regretted. Harsh, uncalled for things. It had taken him days to find the courage to apologize. When Naruto finished the last line of his report, Irika cleared his throat. The older man looked up and smiled. Glad to see you, Irika. I was afraid I'd scared you off. Irika chuckled weakly, rubbing the back of his neck. No, you didn't. I said some awful things and I just... He paused, words failing. What could he even call it? A tantrum? A tirade? A desperate attempt to vent frustration? Naruto didn't wait for him to figure it out. He stood and waved it off. Don't worry about it. We've all had a long year. I knew it wasn't really you talking. He crossed the room and placed a hand on Irika's shoulder. I keep forgetting what you went through, he said quietly. I lost mentors and comrades. You lost your family. Emotions will always speak louder than logic. You'll figure out who Naruto is in your own time. I'll help him where I can, but I won't pretend I can change the world. And I'm sorry if I push too hard trying. Irika bit back a response that would have ruined the peace they'd finally reached. He wondered briefly if Kyubi had caught on to his suspicions, but let the thought go. For now, they sat side by side, talking about everything except Naruto, the Nine Tails, or brainwashing. Luck was with him. Naruto skidded down the hallway and shoved open the teacher's office door with far more force than he meant. Naruto-sensei and Yumino-sensei both looked up, startled. When Naruto gasped out his teacher's name, panic riding his breath, Naruto was out of his seat and at his side in an instant. What's wrong, Naruto? The calm voice grounded him. Naruto took a few ragged breaths and launched into the story. Kuga provoking him, the fight that spiraled, the kunai, everything. He didn't hold back. This wasn't the time to worry about punishment. Naruto-sensei didn't hesitate. He barked instructions to Yumino-sensei to fetch a medic and head straight to the site. Then he scooped Naruto up, like he weighed nothing, and bolted out of the room at full shinobi speed. Under different circumstances, Naruto might have marveled at how fast a teacher could run while hauling a whole kid, but right now, he barely registered it. When they arrived, the kunai thrower was crouched beside his fallen teammate, pressing a bundled-up shirt against the wound. A bloodied kunai lay inches from the unconscious Jinin's hand. Kuga was nowhere in sight. Naruto dropped to the ground and took over first aid, his movements swift and practiced. Naruto stood beside the other boy, watching as his teacher examined the injured boy. A few tense minutes later, Yumino-sensei returned with a medic nin. The adults exchanged rapid-fire words Naruto couldn't follow. Then the medic and Yumino-sensei carried the injured boy toward the hospital. He'll be okay, Naruto said firmly. It could have been fatal, but Daimon did well. Good pressure, smart hands. The kunai shouldn't have been pulled. That can cause a bleed. But this time, the pressure held. Daimon nodded, pale but steady. Then Naruto turned toward him. Now, with Nimyu on his way to recovery, I need to know exactly what... The sentence broke off. A sharp, venomous voice cut across the scene. Naruto flinched. His skin crawled. "I'll tell you what happened, Naruto. Your harmless monster nearly killed my boy's teammate." Gojo stomped into view, face twisted in fury. That thing took those oh-so-handy lessons on how to kill and used them the way his bloodthirsty nature told him to. We've all seen how fast that thing improves. And Kuga's been telling me how violent the monster is when fighting. Now you can see it yourself. It should never have been left to live, let alone taught. Naruto didn't turn around. He knew that voice. It always found a way to ruin everything. Naruto straightened but kept his voice level. "Gojo, this is not the time. We'll speak with each of the boys involved before drawing conclusions. Throwing accusations solves nothing." "I don't need to ask," Gojo snapped. "I already know. Kuga said the monster stabbed Nimue. I won't sit and watch you, or the Hokage, wrangle another loophole to protect your precious pet project." "You've heard one side," Naruto replied evenly. "We'll get clarity by speaking with all parties. Daimon has." "Are you calling my son a liar?" Gojo stormed forward, waving his fists. Naruto's heart thumped. Kuga was Gojo Team's son. That explained too much. "No," Naruto said, with a hint of steel behind his calm. "I'm saying we need facts from everyone before deciding what to do." It wasn't enough. Gojo snapped, and so did Naruto. The two academy teachers collided in a furious exchange. Naruto had never seen adults fight like that. Fierce, raw, barely contained. He'd been trained to expect high-level combat from seasoned ninja, but watching it unfold right in front of him left him stunned. He barely felt the warning in his gut when Kuga lunged at him from the side. Naruto dodged on instinct. The older boy was moving fast, no hesitation, fists flying. His shock slowed him, and Kuga pressed the advantage. "Kuga, what are you doing?" Daimon shouted. Kuga didn't look away. "Shut up! Dad told me what to do. If you're not helping, then don't get in my way." The blonde sent a small thank you to whoever was listening that Daimon decided to stay out of it, but didn't have much time for anything else. Just like that, Kuga was on him. He held a kunai in each hand, limiting Naruto to blocking kicks and dodging slashes. With Kuga's high taijutsu skill and Naruto still off balance from the chaos, the older boy started dominating fast. Naruto scrambled backward, trying to find his rhythm. But Kuga's attacks were relentless and precise. If it had been any other time, Naruto might have marveled at how fast he adapted. After a few early hits, he was dodging every strike Kuga threw at him. Yet he couldn't land a single blow in return. His mind was too clouded. His body too tense. All he could think about was survival. He never noticed where Naruto-sensei's fight had shifted. Not until the shout. "Naruto!" Then impact. Naruto was tackled to the ground, and the breath whooshed out of him. He blinked up in confusion, stunned to find Naruto hovering above him. Why was his teacher smiling? Why wasn't Kuga or Gojo attacking? Why wasn't Naruto getting up? Then Naruto turned his head and coughed into his shoulder. It sounded wrong. Wet. Ragged. Worse than anything Naruto had heard from Nimue earlier. When Naruto looked back, the shoulder of his vest was stained deep red. Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth. "Gojo!" someone shouted. Naruto wished it had been Naruto's voice, but he knew it wasn't. It was Yumino-sensei, arriving too late. Naruto didn't move. Couldn't move. Yumino-sensei knelt down and carefully moved Naruto off of him. And then Naruto saw it. A sword. It was buried deep into his teacher's back. Naruto sat up slowly, dazed. Yumino cradled Ruto carefully, as if holding something fragile that might break further. "What happened?" Yumino's voice cracked. Ruto's reply came in broken gasps. "Goju attacked. Kuga distracted Naruto, gave him the chance." A cough stole the rest of the sentence. "Stop talking. Help's on the way," Yumino said, but tears were already trailing down his face. Naruto felt them on his own cheeks, too. "No, spine severed. No help for that." Ruto fought to lift his head, eyes locking with Naruto's. "I'm sorry." Naruto shook his head. He had nothing to be sorry for. It was Naruto's fault. But Ruto understood his silence. "Not your fault. I should have seen it. Promise me." Naruto nodded. Anything. He'd promise anything. As long as Ruto-sensei was okay. "Goju's wrong. You're not a monster. Don't believe people like that." Another coughing fit, longer this time. "Some people won't see it. But get stronger, surprise them all, grow up and prove to them you're Naruto Uzumaki." He coughed again, body trembling, blood soaking deeper through his vest. Then Ruto turned his gaze toward Yumino. "Irika, don't let the hate take root. You've got a good heart." It seemed to drain the last of him. The blonde sat frozen, whispering prayers, begging for this nightmare to end. Ruto-sensei looked back one last time. A faint smile tugged at his lips, despite everything. "Hey, don't look like that." A cough, wet and harsh. "Smile, Naruto. Always liked your smile." Then the light in his eyes faded and his head dropped limp in Yumino-sensei's arms. Chapter 6. Irika couldn't believe it. He refused to believe it. With shaking fingers, he reached for Ruto's pulse. Pressed. Waited. Nothing. He wanted to scream. To rage. To collapse. Maybe all three. But the only thing that came was silence and tears. A cold numbness crept outward from his chest like frost. The time between Ruto's final breath and the hand settling on Irika's shoulder felt both eternal and instant. "I'm sorry for your loss," said a voice, firm but not unkind. "Go take care of the boy. We'll handle the rest." Irika blinked, his thoughts catching up to reality in fragments. The A&BU standing beside him must have fetched a medic while Irika ran to help. Now the medic Neen was checking Ruto's pulse. Too late for that. He forced the thought aside and scanned the area. 2 masked A&BU were escorting the bound traders, Goju and Kuga, while both cursed and shouted. Kuga's third teammate was gone. Only the dog-masked A&BU, the medic Neen, and Ruto's motionless body remained. The A&BU nodded toward the corner where 2 buildings formed a narrow alley. Squinting, Irika spotted a small shape curled into the shadows. A child. He nodded to the A&BU, signaling he understood, but his feet didn't move. When the medic Neen gently lifted Ruto's body and began preparing it for transport, Irika weakly objected. The A&BU held him back until the blade in his friend's back was slowly, carefully removed. That was more than he could handle. Irika turned, grief heavy in his throat, and walked toward the boy in the alley. He didn't realize who it was until he was almost there. Naruto Uzumaki. Ninetales. Kyuubi. He froze. Right there, crumpled against the wall, was the child Ruto had defended again and again. The child Irika couldn't stop blaming. The reason his friend had died. The center of a year's worth of frustration, fury, suspicion. And the child looked shattered. Naruto hadn't moved. He stared blankly toward where Ruto's body had once been, his eyes wide and empty. Irika hadn't noticed before just how blue those eyes were. Tears streamed down the boy's face in silent rivers. His nose ran. His frame trembled with quiet sobs, but he didn't seem to notice. Didn't look away. Didn't blink. Just stared at the blood. The pool was large. It spread like a rain puddle beneath the spot where Ruto had fallen. Irika's stomach turned. He looked down at his own uniform, stained with the same blood. Naruto's clothing was worse, nearly drenched in it. Then the boy collapsed in on himself, curling against the wall, burying his face into his knees. Irika's heart clenched. He wanted to call him a monster, to believe that this was the Kyuubi's grief at being thwarted, not a boy's, that this pain was deserved. But the argument collapsed the moment he saw the broken child in front of him. This was what he had felt the day he learned his parents were gone. No one should ever have to carry that pain alone. Irika stood still, torn between anger and empathy. The war inside him raged on. Then, slowly, he crossed the final few feet. Kneeling, he lifted Naruto into his arms. The boy didn't speak. He clung to Irika's vest and buried his face into the fabric, sobbing quietly. Irika didn't look back. He ran for the Hokage tower. He couldn't help this child, this hybrid of demon and boy. Not yet. But the Hokage cared for him. The wise ninja would take the blonde off his hands. Maybe he'll know what to do. Naruto jolted awake. His heart slammed against his chest, panic flooding every nerve. Eyes wide, breath sharp and ragged. After a few deep breaths, he realized he was safe in bed. The blonde calmed and lay back down. The pillow was soft and his mattress lump-free. It was perfect. But something was wrong. He cracked one eye open. This wasn't his room. The walls weren't tan. The window didn't stare out over the village. And his mattress was definitely not lump-free. Panic came back threefold. Thoughts were jumping around too much to make sense of anything. He didn't understand what was going on. The bed shifted. Naruto's gaze snapped toward the disturbance. The Hokage was sitting beside him. Not an illusion. Not a picture. The Hokage. Naruto had only seen him once before at the hospital. But this room didn't smell like antiseptic. It smelled like old paper and herbs. He glanced down. Light bandages covered his arms, but they felt fine. "Do you remember what happened, Naruto?" The voice broke through his thoughts like lightning. He stared at the old man, too startled to speak. What did he mean by what happened? He wasn't in trouble, right? He hadn't snuck out again. Even if the academy was closed for a break, he wouldn't miss sword practice. Ruto-sensei wouldn't allow it. No. Ruto-sensei couldn't die. Not like that. He was strong. Unshakable. Gojo team couldn't beat him. It must have been a dream. Just a bad dream. That's all. Naruto's mind tried to rewrite the scene again and again. Maybe he'd run off early to train. Maybe he'd scratched his arms falling from a cliff. Maybe someone found him and brought him to the Hokage because he was in trouble. For practicing ninjutsu too early. Maybe he was being kicked out of the academy and the Hokage wanted to talk. That had to be it. Naruto! The sharp command cracked through his spiraling thoughts. The Hokage's face was suddenly close, too close. Naruto scooted back instinctively, tried to explain. But no words came out. Just a lump. A thick, painful knot jammed in his throat. Breathing became hard. His nose was plugged, his cheeks wet. Tears. He scrubbed at his face quickly and caught a line of snot before it reached his mouth. He tried again, to speak, to explain, but his body betrayed him. A whimper escaped, high and broken. Naruto shook his head hard, trying to jolt the grief away. His pulse thundered in his ears. It felt like his chest was being crushed, stabbed, torn open again and again. Warm arms wrapped around him. He pulled back. They held tighter. He struggled. The Hokage's robes muffled his cries. Words started filtering through. The soft murmur of a lullaby he didn't want to hear. The Hokage telling him to let go. That crying was okay. That it helps. That when someone important dies. No! The scream tore free. Sudden strength surged through him, throwing the Hokage back. Naruto shoved with all his fury, and the old man toppled off the bed. The world tilted. Naruto curled inward, clutching his stomach as fury ignited his veins. He's wrong. No one died. Crying never helps. Anger boiled into hatred. He hated Kugatin for bullying him. He hated Gojatin for blaming him. He hated the Hokage for lying. He hated... No, not Ruto-sensei. He couldn't hate him. Ruto cared, taught him, protected him. Naruto couldn't hold it. The pain rushed in. Memories flickered. He remembered the first time he'd scraped his knee on the cracked orphanage steps and ran to Kagura-san, hoping for comfort. She'd stared down at him, eyes filled with contempt, not concern. A monster doesn't need help. The word stung worse than the scrape. When he cried anyway, she slapped him hard enough to knock him against the wall. Her voice thundered over him. Monsters don't feel pain like real children do. Stop pretending. He remembered the day he dropped a pot of boiling rice in water. It had burned his legs, blistering red. He screamed instinctively, the pain white-hot. Kagura-san struck him again, knocking him out of his shock. Quit your wailing and clean this up. When he couldn't move fast enough, she yelled some more. That night, he didn't get dinner. Just more silence, more shame. And he remembered the time he tried to play in the park, thrilled just to be outside and around other children. He'd laughed, reached out. But the moment he did, the adults shouted. Their glare cut deeper than any insult. Without a word, they gathered their kids and left. No punches, no slaps. Just quiet rejection. That was worse. Watching the villagers turn their backs on him. That loneliness was colder than anything the orphanage had ever inflicted. Then there was Mendo. Mendo and his little gang had treated Naruto like he mattered. For a while, they made life bearable, almost fun. One day, Naruto rushed off to show Mendo a cool rock he found, only to find him surrounded by drunks. They beat Mendo bloody. Naruto had hidden, frozen in fear. Helpless. He didn't know what to do, but he knew Mendo wouldn't want him to see. As the men walked away, one of them snarled. Keep hanging around that monster and we'll be back. That was the moment Naruto understood. No amount of kindness could erase the mark the villagers saw on him. He was alone. and he was furious. He wanted to hurt them. All of them. The men who hurt Mendo. The ones who hurt him. The ones who taught him what it meant to be unwanted. He wanted their blood to pool in the streets the way Ruto-san. Ruto-sensei. The name cut through his rage like steel through silk. Grief returned, brutal and unforgiving. The fury drained from his body, leaving him hollow. He didn't have the strength to resist when arms wrapped around him. The soft robes brushed against his face. He didn't care. Let the Hokage hold him. Let the room go quiet. None of it mattered. "Oh, Naruto," the old man whispered. "Life has not treated you well. No child should suffer so deeply." It doesn't matter. He wasn't a child. He was a monster. Fate has dealt you a cruel hand, but every time you've stood back up. No more. He didn't care anymore. Ruto saw that in you. He saw beyond the whispers and judgment and saw the strength you carry. But he's gone. He's gone because of Naruto. He cared for you, Naruto. He watched you grow. He believed in your future. And Naruto failed him. If he'd been stronger, faster, smarter. You gave him strength, too. Your determination to smile through pain, it mattered. It didn't help. Ruto-sensei still died. Naruto's tears flowed again, burning tracks down his face. You'll be a great ninja one day. That was his dream. For you to thrive, to be happy. Naruto was happy with Ruto-sensei. He didn't care about anything else. He just wanted Ruto-sensei. I know it hurts, but he died protecting someone he cherished. That's a true ninja's way. He shouldn't have died. No one else cared. Why did he? A sob crept out despite his fight to swallow it. His body trembled under the weight of it. It's okay to cry. Let yourself grieve. Only then can you move forward. Naruto didn't want to move forward. He wanted Ruto-sensei back. Another sob broke loose. Naruto buried himself deeper into the Hokage's robes, clutching the fabric as if it were a lifeline. They stayed like that, the warmth replacing silence and sorrow slowly ebbing until only soft sniffles remained. Then, barely louder than a breath, Naruto whispered the question he couldn't understand. Why? The Hokage paused, letting the word hang between them. Why did Ruto save you? He repeated. Because he saw you were just beginning to truly live. You were important to him. And when something is truly important, a ninja will give everything to protect it. Naruto shifted. But why? It was less a question, more a plea. You're very special, Naruto. The Hokage's voice was gentle. Anyone who takes the time to look can see that. Naruto sprang from the bed, fists clenched at his sides, eyes burning with tears and fury. But why did Ruto-sensei have to die? Why didn't someone save him? His voice echoed through the room, bouncing off stone in silence. The Hokage didn't flinch. Sometimes, the old man said slowly, terrible things happen to good people. All we can do is try to keep them from happening again. And when they do, we must choose. Are we crushed by the pain, or do we grow stronger from it? Naruto shook his head, trembling. That's not good enough. Ruto-sensei is dead. You're supposed to protect everyone. Why didn't you protect him? The Hokage knelt in front of the boy, solemn. I failed him, he said plainly. I trusted the academy teachers too much. I thought they'd watch over you as they should. I reassigned your guards, thinking the teachers would honor my orders. But they didn't. No, I believed their training would guide them, that they'd rise above hate, see the truth beneath the surface. I was wrong. Naruto's voice cracked. Then why me? Why does everyone hate me? What did I do? He looked down, eyes searching the wood grain beneath his feet, desperate for answers no one would give him. Then arms wrapped around him again. This time, Naruto didn't resist. Hesitantly, he hugged back. His arms didn't reach all the way, but he clung on with everything he had. If only I could tell you, the Hokage murmured. But I can't. Not yet. Just know that none of this is your fault. You did nothing to deserve the pain you've been given. You're a good boy. And one day, the entire village will see that. He paused, then added quietly, one day, the name Naruto Uzumaki will be known throughout Konoha as a true hero. Naruto knew that as well. The ache in Naruto's heart softened, just a little. Naruto's words returned, half-remembered in fragments. Gojo is wrong. You're not a monster. Don't believe people like that. Some people won't see it. But get stronger, surprise them all, grow up and prove to them you're Naruto Uzumaki. The anger didn't disappear, but something else bloomed alongside it. Resolve. He stepped back and looked at the Hokage. Yes, this man had helped him before. He had gotten him into the academy, given him a chance. And though old and tired, he'd never once turned away. This was the strongest ninja in the village, but he was also one of the kindest people Naruto had met. The Hokage's words from their first meeting rang through his mind. There's more to it than strength. A Hokage must care for every person in the village. He must protect them and look after them. It's not easy, but you learn to look past people's faults and find the good in them. Everyone in the village has value. You just have to see it. Like the ninja saying goes, look underneath the underneath. Naruto looked at this old man who was tired and sad and trying so hard to make Naruto feel better. And he realized that this was also what the Hokage was. An old man. And everyone seemed to forget that. And in that moment, he decided. All right, old man. You better enjoy your last few years in that chair, because I'm taking your job soon. The Hokage blinked. Mouth dropped slightly open. I'm serious. You're looking at Naruto Uzumaki, the future 5th Hokage of Konoha. I'll make everyone acknowledge me. And you'll get to sit around napping like the other old farts. The surprise on the Hokage's face was priceless. Naruto grinned, wide and wild, pride surging like chakra in his veins. Naruto vowed then and there. To Naruto-sensei. He'd show everyone and surprise them all. For just a moment, he could almost see his teacher standing beside the Hokage, smiling that familiar crooked smile. Smile, Naruto. Always liked your smile. His grin stretched wider. Always, Naruto-sensei. Always. Irika pinched the bridge of his nose and tried, with limited success, to wish away his headache. First day back after summer break, and the kids were wound tighter than tripwire. Fights, arguments, full-volume drama. All before lunch. This year was going to be a long one. Right now, his migraine had the names Ino Yamanaka and Sakura Haruno etched across it. Ino was new to his classroom, and he was genuinely impressed by her lung capacity. Sakura, usually reserved and bookish, was matching her friend yell for yell. That was still a shock. Enough is enough. He clapped his hands sharply, pulling the class's attention back to him, then laid a hand on each girl's shoulder to settle the tension. "We're going to review the transformation technique today," he said. "You'll be transforming into Hokage-sama." Collective groans rippled across the room. Irika allowed himself a quiet smile. Sometimes it paid to be the teacher. He worked through the roster, each student stepping up with their best version of the Hokage. Some tall, some short, some with exaggerated wrinkles, but passable all the same. Then he reached a name he hadn't thought about in a long while. Uzumaki Naruto. The classroom noise dropped. Irika blinked at the name. Right. He'd forgotten the container was assigned to his class this year. It had been just over a year since Ruto's death. He'd only seen Naruto from a distance since, always moving, always alone. The academy had gone through an overhaul after the incident. Staff had been reassigned, replaced. Only teachers trusted to treat students respectfully remained. Irika had kept his head down, avoided entanglement where he could, but stories still filtered through. Naruto hadn't excelled like he had under Ruto. Mizuki had taken him in for year 2. Reports spoke of average physical scores and poor academics. Irika hadn't allowed himself to dwell on it. Instead, Naruto had become known for pranks, traps, distractions, chaos. Students and teachers alike fell victim, but Irika and Mizuki never did. He hadn't allowed himself to think too hard about why either. Each year brought some reshuffling of classes, just enough to mix students from different tracks. Irika had 4 returning students, 6 he'd taught back in year 1, and the rest were new faces. Naruto was among them. "Hinge!" The yell broke through Irika's thoughts. Smoke burst around the boy. Irika braced himself. Naruto had learned this technique almost 18 months ago. He should be able to do it blindfolded. As the cloud cleared, Irika frowned. "Hokage-sama, sort of." The figure was squat, distorted, with fish lips and stunted features. A parody. Irika slapped his palm to his face. The class erupted in laughter. Naruto joined in, sheepish. "That was a joke." The boy grinned, rubbing the back of his head. "I did it on purpose." Irika didn't smile. He pointed at the blonde sharply. "Quit fooling around, Naruto. This is your 3rd year in the academy." Naruto flinched, surprised at the harshness. "Again," Irika said flatly. "Properly." Naruto nodded quickly and tried again. More smoke. More distortion. Irika stared at the comical figure, but then froze. Those brown eyes weren't fully brown. There was a glint of blue. Not vivid, but just enough to catch his attention. They weren't mocking. They were pleading. He didn't have time to consider it. The class burst out laughing again. "You've been here 3 years, and that's all you've got?" Kiba and Izuka barked. Loud. Unfiltered. Irika sighed, not for the first time today. Kiba had a sharp instinct, but no volume control. With his partner dog arriving this term, Irika had hoped he'd be assigned elsewhere. Naruto released the transformation and glared back. "You all just watch," he said. "I will become Hokage one day." The laughter doubled. "Are you stupid? You? Hokage?" Kiba jeered. Naruto dropped his gaze. To the class, it probably looked like shame. Irika could see differently. Teeth grit. Hands clenched. His whole body was shaking. Not with tears. With restraint. The class thought he might cry. Irika wondered if he might snap. Just as Irika stepped forward, Naruto's shoulders loosened. Beneath his bowed head, the boy's mouth twisted into something sly, almost proud. The classroom was still ringing with laughter, but Irika was close enough to catch the whisper. "They'll definitely be surprised, Ruto-sensei." Naruto looked up wearing the cheesiest, most ridiculous grin imaginable. It was fox-like and gleeful, playing the fool. But behind that expression, Irika glimpsed something sharper. Determination. It flickered in Naruto's eyes, just for a moment. Steel beneath the squint. Then Irika leaned a little closer, and the mask returned. "Sorry about that, Yumino-sensei. Am I done?" The room was still bubbling with amusement, but Irika knew the result wouldn't change, no matter how many times Naruto tried the hinge. He could see it now. Naruto hadn't failed. He'd refused. There was something deeper going on, and it had nothing to do with chakra control. That glint in his eyes hadn't faded, just tucked itself away. Irika studied the boy more closely. He hadn't looked into Naruto's eyes like this in a long time. Not since Naruto's death. Back then, all he'd seen was grief and confusion, and he hadn't wanted to confront what it meant. He'd let doubt linger. Let pain fester quietly. Better to keep his distance. But time had dulled the ache. Grief had given way to memory. And Naruto had believed. Irika wasn't sure what Naruto was yet. Kyuubi vessel or lonely boy? Fury or hope? But for Naruto, for his friend, he was willing to find out. "Yumino-sensei?" Naruto blinked, confused, jolting Irika from his thoughts. The laughter had softened. Class was watching. Irika gave the boy one more searching glance, then nodded. "Call me Irika-sensei, Naruto." Naruto's eyes widened, surprised. It was a quiet gesture. Subtle, but deliberate. In academy tradition, students only used a teacher's first name when granted a more personal mentorship, an instructor who saw potential worth nurturing. Naruto would be the first. Irika smiled, feeling the memory of Naruto settle gently in his chest. He made a silent promise to see what his friend saw. No more blind hate. No more hesitation. Chapter 7. Naruto had never liked the end-of-year silence in the academy halls. It wasn't the quiet that bothered him, it was what it meant. That the tests were over. That the results were final. That he'd failed. Again. His third Genin exam? He knew exactly what was coming before it ever started. The layout hadn't changed. Taijutsu demonstration, written scores, basic theory, weapon drills. And finally ninjutsu. Specifically Bushin. Naruto's stomach had been twisting since breakfast, but he hadn't let it show. He still walked into the exam room with his usual grin, his usual swagger. But underneath it all, he was scared. Really scared. He'd stopped reading textbooks 2 years ago, not since Naruto-sensei was killed. Once through the material was enough. He didn't care about grades anymore. Dead last had a ring to it. Who'd expect the village prankster to become Hokage? The surprise would be perfect. Only, Bushin wouldn't cooperate. His clones still came out half-formed, twisted. They looked more like pale, deflated bodies than anything resembling himself. Last month, he tried pulling up his grades, tried fixing the damage. It helped a little. At least his taijutsu scores had always been fine. But ninjutsu? Still his weakness. So when Irika-sensei called for Bushin, Naruto braced himself, gritted his teeth, tried to focus. Smoke filled the room. And then they appeared. Deformed. Again. Irika-sensei's voice cracked sharp across the room. Naruto, this is your 3rd year. You've had plenty of time to master the basics. Naruto scowled. I did my best. You could pass me without Bushin, you know that? Next to Irika, Mizuki nodded. He's right, he said smoothly. Bushin's not mandatory. Mini Jinin pass with alternate strengths. We could give him conditional approval. Irika's jaw clenched. The worst thing a teacher can do, he said evenly, is pass a student who isn't ready. Naruto has potential, but all year he's refused to act like a shinobi. I won't pass him without Bushin. Naruto stared down at the floor, fists tight at his sides. He wanted to yell again, wanted to fight the decision, but he didn't, because Irika was right. He hadn't acted like a ninja. He refused to do bookwork. He'd clung to pranks, mischief, distraction. He kept the villagers hating him, kept their expectations low. If they were going to stare anyway, at least give them a reason. And it had been part of the plan. Make them laugh. Then make them stare. Then become Hokage and blow every mind in the village. But now it was hurting him. He trudged out of the exam room, shoulders hunched. No headband. No promotion. Another year at the school. He couldn't leave until the school day ended, and there wasn't anywhere to go anyway. He drifted across the yard and snagged the tree swing before anyone else could. He stayed there all afternoon. His classmates noticed. They always noticed. No headband meant failure, and they didn't let it slide. Taunts floated toward him from huddled groups. Mocking. Pointed. Naruto didn't respond. He stared into the distance, watching the light change. He barely noticed the grounds emptying, the hunger building, the shadows shifting. Not until a hand landed gently on his shoulder. He blinked, startled, and turned. Mizuki-sensei stood beside him, smiling. Naruto didn't know what to think. Last year, Mizuki-sensei hadn't treated him badly. He hadn't treated him well either. No cruelty, no kindness. Just neutral professionalism. This smile felt strange, but Mizuki didn't just bring a smile. He brought a secret. There's a special test, he said, reserved for students who show promise, but don't meet the standard requirements. It's unofficial, quiet, hidden. Naruto tilted his head. You mean a second exam? Exactly. Mizuki leaned in. A test the Hokage himself oversees. He needs to see your skills firsthand. There's a scroll. It's old. Important. Hidden. If you can retrieve it, you'll have proven yourself enough to pass. Naruto's eyes widened. It made sense. Of course, the Hokage would be involved. If Irika-sensei was too strict to pass him, the Hokage would want to see things for himself. After all, he was the Hokage. He cared about everyone. Naruto grinned. Time to be surprising. Naruto stood frozen in the clearing, scroll clutched against his chest like it could shield him from Mizuki's words. You want to know why the villagers hate you? Mizuki's voice rang out, low and cruel. It's because you're the Ninetales, the demon fox. They look at you and see the monster that destroyed their homes, killed their families. That's what you are. Naruto didn't move. He couldn't. The world slowed. Something cold had snapped open in his chest. 2 years. 2 years of questions and sideways glances and whispered words that stopped when he entered the room. Of wondering what he'd done wrong. Of suspecting something, anything, but never knowing. And now it was here. This. That wasn't an answer. It was a punch to the soul. It tore through him and left every part of his body humming with disbelief. Then he heard the whistle of metal. His eyes widened. Irika-sensei lunged. The shuriken hit his teacher full in the back. Blood arced in the air like a cruel signature across the leaf-dappled sky. Irika crashed to the ground in front of Naruto, half shielding him, half collapsing. He twisted around, coughing. There was blood on his lips, his shoulders shuddering. Just like Naruto's breath hitched. Just like Naruto-sensei. The image blurred, overlapped. It was the same protective lunge, the same bloody cough. Another teacher, dying for him. No! No! He turned and bolted. Was he running to get help? Or running to escape another body on the ground? He didn't know. Branches slapped his arms, feet scraping dirt. His chest felt too tight to breathe. Another sensei was dead. Because of him. The only ones who cared about him. Dead. Again. The forest spun and stretched and twisted behind his tears. But halfway through he stopped. His fists clenched. What if Irika-sensei wasn't dead? And he'd left him there. With Mizuki. With the one who just tried to kill them both. The village was too far. Help was too far. And what if it was already too late? He couldn't risk that. He wouldn't. Naruto turned, ran back, broke through the tree line, and stopped short. There, in the clearing, stood another him, facing Mizuki. He blinked. But no, it wasn't him. The stance was wrong. The expression too calm, too sharp. It was Irika-sensei in Henshin. He was alive. Naruto's heart soared. But then he saw the way Irika-sensei swayed on his feet after transforming back to his true image. The blood that soaked his vest. The tight grip on the kunai that was more defiant than stable. He wasn't dying like Naruto-sensei. But he wasn't going to last much longer either. And Mizuki saw it too. No more games! Mizuki snarled, kunai raised. You're wasting your last breath defending the thing. Naruto moved before he could think. He slammed into Mizuki, kicked him down hard. The scroll thudded against his back. But then he paused. Now what? He glanced at Irika-sensei, who was still upright but barely. Who had just defended him. Told Mizuki he wasn't the demon. Said he was Naruto. Naruto stared at the man who'd taken a hit for him, just like Naruto-sensei had. But he lived. His chest burned with something new. So he stood tall. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, he shouted, voice cracking with fury and pride. I'm gonna be the next Hokage. And I'm kicking your butt. Mizuki laughed. You? You can't even. But Naruto didn't wait. He dropped into a stance. Focused. Summoned everything. Shadow clone jutsu. The forest exploded with motion. Dozens of Narutos flashed into being, perfectly formed, poised for battle. Not limp bodies, not pale disasters. These were real, solid clones. He saw Irika's eyes widen. Saw the disbelief shift into quiet awe. Saw Mizuki's confidence turn to panic. Naruto grinned. Time to surprise everyone.